I'll push the go live button and see if they're seeing anything. Okay, you guys seeing this? Anybody seeing this video?
I can see you on my screen, and I can see Mark in the icon here.
Hello,
you guys.
Everybody. Can anybody in the chat live? I'm gonna send you the chat live and see if
yeah, please do that. Thanks.
Guys, I'm so excited if this is working, and even if it's not, just that we're all together is fun.
Here we go. We have Link. You know, it's really funny. It looks way better on YouTube than it does on mine. It's really funny.
We might want to do some.
I just had to mute myself. I can hear my audio coming through here.
I was about to say, I'm gonna put my volume down a bit. Also, is anybody recent Tartarians? Do you guys see this? Is this working for you? Give me some sort of a thumbs up or someone comment that you can see the videos. Eugenie, was that a response? I hope so.
Is anybody hearing an echo coming through on my end? I just want to make sure that my volume is sufficiently low where my mic is not picking it up.
It's working, says Randy. All right, guys, cool. Well, I just wanted to start the show then. I guess we'll say recent Tartarians, welcome to the show. I'm Andreas. Jeremiah is here. Mark is here. Ben's going to be with us in a minute. He's just getting some water. He'll be right back. Thank you guys for coming back so that we could do this. I know that, Mark, you've got some really exciting news. Jeremiah, you've been doing some interesting stuff. What's been going on recently?
So we put the first hour of footage together. This was recorded over the course of like 2-3 weeks, where we did the parallel plate capacitor experiment. And I edited down the footage. I wanted to show it to you right now, just go over some editing tips, what you think about it, what we should do. And yeah, I'm trying to get that up on the screen and share the screen with you, but I'm having a little trouble downloading the video. I'll let you know when it's ready.
For sure. You know, on the left,
what you think about parallel plate capacitors.
Awesome. On the left is the screen share button once you get the video downloaded. And yeah, let's get into that in a minute. Jeremiah, what's up with you? What have you been doing?
I've been working on a small Tesla type portable battery power supply so that I can power my pulse precipitators on a flying anti-grav drone. So
wow.
I have this. I'll bring that out later, but whatever, I got it put together. It's working. Kind of working. I burned up a potentiometer. That's fine. I have 10 on order. Just waiting for them to get here. Not bad for $3.
So your plan is to do some energy harvesting with this, basically.
How much? I would say energy conversion. I'm trying to come up with a pulse power supply that is light enough, as in less than like 300 grams, that can fly. And generally, that's not something that's been attempted. But like for example, so you guys can see this. This section here of this box is the power supply that supplies this coil. So it's really tiny. It's a couple of boards that are through hole, not surface mount. They're much heavier than they need to be, but I can shrink all this down to like, well, I can basically fit all the electronics to control this coil onto something like the size of this razor blade. So.
Yeah, it's definitely the most beautiful thing I've seen created in a minute. Whoa.
Let's see, that will be this light. There we go.
Forget what you heard. This is what every kid needs. Yeah, this is exactly. This is the coolest music I've ever heard. What? Keep this.
That is amazing.
It has like a.
All right. Shut up and take my money.
It's so the problem is it's got this like trigger thing on it, and it's a super awesome because the trigger controls the duty cycle. But the problem with it is the trigger is pulled from an Xbox 360 controller because it has this really limited range. This is the trigger here, and the trouble is that Xbox 360 potentiometer has been used for like 3 years before I got my hands on it, so it was thoroughly worn out. And as soon as I installed it into this thing, any little glitch or tiny hiccup in the signal ends up as a very long duty cycle, which gives me 100% power output. Because the way this thing works is the potentiometer holds it back, but without it, it goes full bore. So I've got new ones on order, and that should pretty much fix the trigger problem, and that should allow me 0 to 100% duty cycle. Right now, it's just 300% duty cycle, so that's not really That's just my built-in backup circuitry catching the problem and keeping it from going completely out of control, but it does allow it to go to 300% before it clamps. So hopefully we'll get that solved within about 10 days, and then that power supply should be ready for integration or at least testing.
That's the most amazing thing. Oh my gosh, that's the Christmas special right there. I'm pretty sure.
I'm actually hoping to put together Tesla coil kits based around this tiny little circuit and hopefully sell them to fund some of this research, because heaven knows this research needs funding and people need something that they get out of it tangibly right away. And this is something great that you can set up. It's a little 12-volt Tesla coil that generates 2.5-inch sparks, and it draws only a couple of watts doing it. I can run it off this battery pack for over an hour, which is friggin' insane, generating 2.5 to 3-inch long sparks. So people are going to eat the coil up. I know they're going to love the kit, and it's going to do stuff that no other kit currently does in the market, which is provide you fairly long and decently powerful sparks running off a tiny little battery pack that is not necessarily larger than a 9-volt. So
it's a freaking lightsaber.
It's the thing that I think every Chartarian probably needs one. So we'll make sure that there'll be a link to the kit, because I think I'm not even kidding, like, it's fun, and I'm sure
it's fun. That's the idea. It's
ladies love a good Tesla coil.
It's not too serious, man. You should enjoy it.
But it's good for your family, because everyone needs a Tesla coil. You need to show your kids this before they're 10 years old, so that they can be part of the future.
I agree. And the cool part about it is running off 12 volts and having no storage capacitors, no tank components, no high voltage power supply. Literally nothing in this circuit runs over 12 volts except for the output from the secondary, which is limited in current. So you can't hurt yourself from it. You can't shock yourself from it. It's literally impossible. The only thing you can do is from the heat of the arc, you can burn yourself, but
it's totally
then you're going to feel the heat.
It's totally safe, Mom. So,
I mean, I've been arcing off my fingers for days, and I don't have any burn marks on those. So
this is not a dildo, but it when I was in the 19th century time traveling, I remember thinking this was exactly what I wanted to bring back with me. And what it is it's basically
a violet ray wand. Kind of little induction type electromagnetic Tesla coil. But it's not really a Tesla coil because it has no resonance.
Love a little bit of that. You guys want a little bit of that on your face?
Oh, you got the helium electrode installed right now.
Maybe
or your purple vacuum electrodes.
People need more like neon and gas electricity.
Special emissions of different gases and atmospheres. Really interesting.
Does that make ozone?
It's got
it's
neon.
Self-contained. I don't think it does.
Yeah.
But it might.
I think these are all just neon.
You feel static discharge a lot.
You've got neon, you've got argon, and then you've got vacuum. Those are your three common electrotherapy electrodes. I think the one you just put in there now is probably a vacuum electrode.
There's a vacuum one and there's a neon one, and I know that there's a few other gas ones too. Yeah. I want to get a few more attachments to the.
We have another neon one. The neon ones prevent high current.
I think this is the other cool. I don't know, man. I think playing with electricity is where we're headed. You want to play? Here,
no, you have a Christmas special. Get 2 for 1. You get a.
Yeah, I mean, so it seems like that what we're learning though is electricity stuff. Electricity has a lot of power to it, and a lot of the people that have been using this stuff since this is something from the 19th century. This is not a new invention. Similarly to the Tesla coil, but it's being remanufactured right now in Korea because people love cosmetic products, and some of the best ones seem to involve electricity. So
work at all.
There we go. See, now I've got my own wand.
Look at that! It's genius.
Oh,
God, the mercury though. I hope that's good for your face. But
well, mercury is not leaving the bulb.
Yeah,
that would be a problem.
But what happens exactly when mercury against the glass? You think that the ions from one side of the glass, the other side of the glass, are excited in a different way because of the gases?
I really don't know. No, I don't think they get through. I think that you're getting some UV radiation out of the poor thing. But other than that,
I see both UV radiation, and then I wonder about condensation, because I think about water condensation. I wonder, can you cause on the other side of the glass some sort of alchemical process because of a gas and electricity on one side to the other side, where it's not that the water is coming through to the other side, but that it's forming a bond with other elements in the atmosphere around us. There's all kinds of gases. So some of those gases might be,
well, a couple of things. First off, the fluorescent tube is under vacuum. So if any vacuum is allowed to increase in its volumetric pressure, what will happen is the vaporous mercury inside that is currently a gas will turn into a liquid again, and it'll instantly condense out. And that'll all be sucked into the volume of the bulb instead of being pushed out. So if I were to say crack the bulb, the mercury is going to turn into a little bead, and then I just have to be careful not to tip it so it doesn't fall out. But other than that, I mean, pretty much as soon as it loses that vacuum, it's not going to be able to stay in a gaseous state at room temperature anymore. I can't tell you what would happen if the bulb was hot, say if it was actually running off of a ballast and I took it out of the socket, it was about 150 degrees. Maybe then there could be some thermionic emission that could take place, but at room temperature, not having been around, I wouldn't really be worried about it unless I crack it.
What in terms of health effects from electricity, you know, from ions, do you think that there's much room for that to actually be healthy?
I think that ions can be healthy in a couple of respects. One, we know that they can sanitize the skin. They can kill bacteria, fungus, other things like that. You can use ionic treatments to kill all kinds of fungus, including toe fungus and whatnot. You can use it to treat skin abrasions. You can also use high temperature plasma to treat skin abrasions and remove warts and birthmarks and spots and stuff like that. So there are some tangible applications in there, but you definitely should not be breathing in ions, and that's the real problem, because when those things hit the lungs, they catalytically react and oxidize, and as we all know, any kind of oxidizers within the human body are extremely detrimental and can cause cell mutations and damage genetic materials. So unfortunately, it's kind of strange. You know, we need oxygen to survive, but above 20% oxygen, we start to have a toxic level, and chemicals inside of our body oxidize, and we can die from it. So it's kind of one of those strange things. Above 50% oxygen is considered lethal, a toxic gas for humans.
Yeah.
Looks like, Mark, you've got something you want to show us this clip really quick?
Gotta love that banner, man.
Yes, so it's right now it's cut down to 12 minutes. Not all the audio is up to exactly what I expect it to be, so we're going to be doing like voiceovers, and it needs a lot of editing. So this is a rough cut of what we did so far. You guys ready?
Yeah.
I hope
What's
you
the
guys are ready.
voltage? You say it in the video, how much voltage you're pushing?
Roll clip.
Okay, let's roll the video. So basically over here, I'm going to have like Falcon Space and the name of the episode pop up. And this is when I started working on parallel plate capacitor experiment with, we're mixing epoxy together. And first thing I do is calibrate the scale. We're using the scale to measure the epoxy out. It needs a ratio of 100 to 16. So first thing I'm doing is calibrating the scale.
And just a quick note for people, this video will have audio in the end. We're looking at a low frame rate as a preview here, but this is a high definition video with full audio once the edits are done. So if you want to see that and get more details on the experiment, all you got to do is hang around for the edits to be finished. But for now, Mark can kind of narrate what's going on.
That's going to be posted on a whole bunch of channels. I just want to get it out there. I think I could probably fast forward this part. It's kind of boring. So basically here we speeded it all up. We're mixing together the epoxy. A little earlier though, I actually show, I think it was later.
So is our school equipment.
And in the middle of the night, the chipmunks came in. And then
This is the second part of the epoxy. And then the next thing we did is warmed it up in the oven to lower its viscosity.
So for those who remember last time we talked, they were working on this epoxy.
See if it gets less viscous so we can add in barium titanate.
And this is the epoxy that we're using. Basically,
this epoxy they're using to hold. You want to remind people is to hold the two ends, right, of your circuit, or what's your plan for the
What's happening is this epoxy is saturated with barium titanate, which is a very good high K dielectric.
It's not saturated yet. This is the process of saturating barium titanate into an epoxy and creating a certain shape out of it. So we want to mix barium titanate, which is a high K dielectric. It's basically a material that retains a static charge very well. And so we're mixing it with an epoxy, which is a good insulator, so that this way we can apply a high voltage on this material without having to break down through the material. because although it has a high K value, it doesn't have a very strong dielectric strength. So we're making a capacitor here. It's basically round shaped. I'm using this little piece of copper as a guide, and then we basically we're copying the shape of that round copper disc, and I'm warming up the epoxy in the oven in order to, they're not mixed yet, in order to lower the viscosity of the material so that it becomes more liquidy, and then we're going to be able to add in the barium titanate to the two components. And at this point, I called up Jeremiah, who's in the video there in the corner. You can see him. And we're talking about how much barium titanate to add.
Well, wait, Ben had a question. Ben, what was that?
You said you're making it more easier to spread. What kind of gap are you talking between these plates? Is it in like a fraction of a millimeter?
No, we're more like about a half an inch. You'll see.
Wow.
You'll see it later on because we also threw in a piece of Teflon.
Yes, this is super high voltage.
We're planning on going up to 100,000 volts DC.
I mean, it's pretty crazy for epoxy to be able to
proportion to distance.
Oh yeah, the epoxy is good for several thousand volts per mil. It's incredibly good stuff. In fact, it's almost miraculous how incredible the insulators are today. For example, this piece of insulation material here, and I can show you from the side. Let me plug in my light here so you can actually see me again. Okay, so this is a piece of insulation material that is a diffuser from a television, and if I turn it to the side, you can see it's about as thick as a piece of cardstock.
Wait, so that's
is that a mineral?
That's a diffuser. So that's in a cathode ray tube to diffuse.
No, not a cathode ray tube, in a LED or CCFL TV. So if I like shine the flashlight on it, you can see, it's a nice fine point, but it makes the circle of the light really, really obvious. So this is designed to diffuse the light so you get a nice even light spread over your entire screen area. Anyways, the great part about this stuff is it's incredibly thin, and this one piece here that's about as thick as a piece of cardstock is capable of handling over 50,000 volts.
50,000 volts.
50,000 volts.
That's per
layer. So it's one of those materials that you can find in the garbage because people are throwing out TVs all the time. LEDs and power supplies, and they get too hot against the wall. So you can just pull this stuff out. It's readily available pretty much everywhere. You just got to get a garbage TV flat screen.
Let's finish up the movie, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically here we're mixing the epoxy together with both parts we added barium titanate to, and now we're mixing it all together, and then we're going to pour it into the mold. And it's all sped up. I plan on having maybe Jeremy or Jeremiah all talking on top of this, try to explain what's going on here, why we think this is going to work, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, we're filling it up with epoxy, and that goes on for a little bit, and it sort of settles down.
Basically, what I was going to tell you is we actually made this epoxy.
So we're going to warm it up a little bit more to make it to even lower the viscosity even better, to get all the bubbles removed.
The epoxy to cure needs to be at a certain temperature.
That's actually not true. It needs to be at room temperature once it's mixed together. And on top of that, I put another layer of epoxy, just plain epoxy without any barium titanate in it. It's coming up real soon. You get a picture. This is the finished product.
Electroepoxy.
Later, when we actually took it apart.
From the plate it was sitting on, and this is the end result. I may have to clean it up a bit, but
I don't think when people hear the word epoxy, they really get like what it is. But if you think about that, super strong plastic. It's something that can be like bulletproof glass, but better. If you remember the manifold Earth.
Did you see the setup that we're doing here? Basically, we're taking this sheet of Teflon, attaching that on top of it, and then there's going to be a piece of copper on top and a piece of copper on bottom, and it's going to be a sort of tapered pyramid shape. And we're going to apply the high voltage to the top of that, and the base of that is going to be grounded. It's all going to be attached together with hot glue. So the first thing I do is go and straighten out the barium titanate disc. So I want to clean up the edges a little bit, get our grinder set up, I take off my lab coat because it's going to be a big mess. And here we start grinding.
So we're back at it.
And do you want to explain? So, you're trying to get this material to have electricity, just be able to flow through it. Why are you doing that? And do you think that's going to help you with you've got an anti-gravity company. You think that's going to help you now?
So basically, we've read a couple papers. This is basically the Bipolar-Brown effect. We're making a parallel plate capacitor with a lot of capacity to it, a lot of joule energy storage capacity, and we're applying a high voltage on it and seeing across, a scale whether it leads any weight or gains any weight. And here I am building the parallel plate capacitor. We have to heat up the the hot glue, attaching everything together. And what happens next? Okay, now we're putting on a harness on it. And now I rigged this up in the shop. It's basically a force sensor that I'm attaching to the air duct. That has a little hook on it. That little connection goes to a laptop that's going to give us a weight reading or a force reading. I actually had it set up in the end with the cable on the other side.
Okay, here's the layout of our setup. We have a high voltage power supply.
That cable over there is supposedly good for 100,000 volts. It ended up failing on us. It did not reach 100,000 volts. Bottom is a power supply. The top one is a voltage divider that acts as a resistor, so you can discharge the capacitor. The reason why we don't have this inside the Faraday cage this time is because one of the experiments claims that it actually doesn't work in a Faraday cage. So one thing I was thinking is that maybe one of the reasons why it didn't work in the end was because there's metal on top of it. I don't know if that has any effect on the end effect.
You think the metal was getting it was used as insulatory material and it was pulling some of the ion flow?
To keep external magnetic fields out.
I have no idea.
Magnetic flow, bro.
I have no idea, but something like that probably, it's possible that there's some connection, or it's possible that they weren't giving us accurate information about the weight loss. But here you can see me cranking it up. I didn't have another camera on me to capture the weight footage, but it didn't change. There wasn't any change in weight noted. We got up to about 75,000 volts, at which point the dielectric in the wire broke down. You hear that? A little sparking.
There you go, getting breakdown.
Yeah, those little sparks.
That's
it's like right around here. There's a little spark of breakdown. Yeah, at that point it broke down completely. The wire had a physical hole in it, microscopic hole, but at these voltages, electricity finds a way. So we weren't able to put the full amount of energy that we planned across the capacitor, but so far the results that we saw aren't looking promising for this theory.
I thought it was rather interesting. Last time we spoke, we had some thoughts about subatomic particles and arranging their frequencies in order to disperse their mass and avoid weight, the way we understand.
You mean
weight.
inertia?
Yeah, the inertia and weight would
like
just
pushing a heavy rock.
You could make a rock as light as air. Is the idea by moving the actual subatomic particles to arrange themselves,
like momentum of the particles.
You could take a person and you could align all the momentum of each one. So
the basic idea is that you have momentum in three dimensions under normal conditions, because you have a generally uniform distribution of energy within space and time. And what you're effectively doing here is you're giving an electrical orientation to all charged particles within each atom, and you're affecting the directionality of forces exerted on and experienced by the protons and electrons. The neutrons, they don't really experience a whole lot, but they still contribute because they do have a magnetic moment. But that's what really you're doing. You're taking your momentum effect from being capable of experiencing three-dimensional force, and you're pushing everything into one dimension, which allows you to negate things coming from the other two.
Yeah.
That's literally, so what I thought was really funny was that's exactly how the next month Rick and Morty came out, and they did that to Jerry. They made him, they took the inertia of all of his subatomic particles and made him lighter than air slightly, so he has to wear his shoes or he'll float away as like a honing move. And I just thought it was just amazing. It happened within 3 weeks of us talking.
Morty.
That's what I've always thought.
Rick and Morty, come on, Mark. Tell me you watch Rick and Morty.
I've never seen Rick and Morty.
Dude,
you
missed an hour.
I sort of made up after reading the Alzaphan paper. It was my own take on how it possibly makes sense that there's this connection between dynamic nuclear orientation and inertial mass.
Well, you probably haven't seen the show, and I believe that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Harmon or some of their folks have seen Falcon in your research, to be perfectly honest.
They might be watching.
I'm not surprised if they've seen Falcon yet, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're dabbling on topics that are popular and have been for a long time. I mean, this has been going on since Roswell, and these discussions haven't stopped.
That's true. You know, we've been looking. So, what do you think about some of those cosmic disclosures, guys? Not just Wilcock and Corey Good, but I know they've got.
You saw Wilcock's latest video where he's out in the Sierra Nevada or something like that, talking about the end of the world. Did you see that video?
Did he say it was today at 5 p.m. or something?
I remember last time I saw him, he was out
there. He was talking about how literally if Trump doesn't get impeached, then this and this is going to happen. Then he had some insider who passed away at the exact same day as another insider who was telling him some crazy shit that the year 2020 is when it's happening. All of that.
I don't know. Anybody who wants to bring politics into the topic, I would have a serious question about the legitimacy of whatever they're talking about.
Yeah.
If anybody really believes that Trump, whether or not he or anybody else as president has anything to do with this technology getting out there, they're seriously delusional.
They're missing the point.
It never has been.
I disagree with you because Trump is somebody who's crazy enough to literally spill the beans on everything.
Oh, I agree. I agree in this, but he's not going to be the guy that implements any of this stuff. I mean, the truth is, if somebody can just get it out there, it doesn't really matter whether or not the industry is doing it.
He has no clue what any of this stuff is.
Oh, God, no. God, no. And none of the other presidents have either.
Well, I think
maybe Kennedy. I mean,
kind of a fun thing that everyone thinks that whatever the whole point of it is it's like a bunch of mechanisms. So you start one thing and the next thing happens, you've got, all of a sudden there's more energy put into politics because people are worrying about it instead of worrying about the tech, and it's just a distraction from everything else. Meanwhile, there's places in the Caribbean, there's places in South America and Africa that are working on ionic lifters, and you look at China right now with the technology, look at what's really going on, and it's a lot I think people like to believe that their personal opinion has more power than it does, which is why politics is such a useful thing to put energy into, because it makes you think that the more logical you are at understanding something, the more rhetoric that you've retained, then the more control you have over your reality. But it's a logical fallacy. Whereas if you can literally hold a micro Tesla coil in your hand, you might feel slightly more control. I don't know. I mean, so that's the thing. It kind of makes the entire argument of politics seem abstract and absurd. Because
anybody who's going to make any kind of serious disclosure and then tell people, well, we're waiting on this guy or that organization or this party.
But
if you're waiting on somebody, then what the hell are you doing in the meantime? Do you have information or don't you?
There is something to say about disruptive technologies in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I don't suppose it's been like the first time this century that something's been invented and it's been purchased and hidden. Think about how many thorium companies get purchased and hidden so that you don't ever hear about them ever again. There's been tons of companies that
also that thing that Google bought, they had
I agree. The whole thorium thing is crazy, dude. We should have thorium reactors. We should have had thorium salt reactors now for decades.
Arguably they do. That's what my point is. I think that there are people that have that, but there's a few of them, and it's either military or it's paramilitary. They're former military corporations.
They hired 1,400 PhD professors from around the world and are investing upwards of $500 million into different ways of creating thorium reactors. And America really stands to lose on this. And to be honest, America's policy with nuclear is they want to be second. And you see this around the world. Nobody wants to take that first step. And I think that's the reason why we don't have thorium reactors in our cities. If we had a thorium reactor today of the technology that is possible, you could literally fit one inside of a container. And it would be safe too. And it runs at like 95% efficiency instead of 5% efficiency.
Yeah, it's crazy. But the most important part about thorium reactors is the fact that they are subcritical. That if you stop feeding them with neutrons, which you have to inject into the salt from an external source, usually it's an electron beam, neutron emitter. But if you stop feeding the salt solution neutrons, the reaction stops and it goes into a cool down state. So the fact that it's subcritical means that there is no explosion, there is no horrible reaction that takes place, and it's safe for everybody to be around.
And not only that, if there's a major accident or something, and let's say the plant loses all power, they've devised a method of, quote, walk-away safety, or literally when the power turns off, the setup of the reactor makes itself safe. And also, like, even if the reactor was hit by an atom bomb or taken out by a conventional missile, the amount of actual fissile material that is in the reactor core at any one time is very little.
Exactly right, because it's only in the salt. It's particles in the salt.
Right, and you only need a small amount of it to keep the entire reaction going. You don't need to have, the amount of uranium that you have in a freaking uranium reactor.
So you guys, we've been talking a lot about ionic lifters. At some point, that was something that kind of brought us together, that we had a commonality of interest. Do you think that attaching a small Tesla coil, kind of the way that Jeremiah has been working on, to an ionic machine with some sort of, do you think you could power it with thorium and have small? Oh
God, yeah, man, you could have that thing fly indefinitely.
Yeah.
With today's technology.
Thorium, though, is a little different because when we're talking about thorium reactors, we're talking about a steam-based system. You're not putting a steam station on board of an ion lifter device.
That's why I've got 27 patents on how to make nuclear or radioactive batteries, because specifically it turns out it's really not that hard to take a radioactive source and get some direct electricity conversion out of it. And the most obvious and easy way to do that is through nuclear voltaic means, where you actually use a material to convert the beta emissions into some spectrum of visible light, usually in the deep UV, and then you'll convert that with some specialty made panels that operate on just that single wavelength. So some of these batteries are available. They on average last between 10 to 30 years. Some of them last upwards of 100 years. And they are direct beta decay to electrical energy conversion devices. They're egregiously expensive, but you can go on eBay and buy yourself some thoriated rods and stick them next to a solar panel and build your own.
Wow.
It costs you maybe about $7 to make one of these things. It'll provide you about 100 microamps at 3 volts, and it will run for 20 years.
Jeremiah, every time you talk about something, I get this feeling that you're just going to pull it off the shelf and show it to us.
A lot of this stuff I have, unfortunately, like, I'm not in my lab, and I don't really have a lab anymore. Otherwise, I would be doing more showing than talking, and ultimately we'd like to get back to that point where we can do more demonstrating than showing. We're getting there. It's a slow and painful process to try to reacquire a laboratory space, and everything I'm doing right now is in an apartment, so there's very limited experiments that I can do without disrupting the neighbors, the electrical systems and TVs and other things like that. So
you're definitely the kind of guy they read about in the newspapers. They're like,
I've been in the newspapers multiple times, and unfortunately in the news multiple times, but it was never for anything good.
Man makes Tesla coil in garage always looks bad in the newspapers. I don't know why. It shouldn't. It should look good. But
dude, they evacuated an entire city block because they thought a laser pointer was some kind of incendiary device. I am not kidding. This is some shit that I actually went through.
Jeremiah, you need to download the WhatsApp app. Me and Andreas and Jeremy, a bunch of friends of mine, are on this chat with other people who are literally doing this type of thing.
Really?
It's pretty cool, actually. It's amazing, the Falcon space chat. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, on the WhatsApp
Okay.
thing. There's another one that I was going to invite you both to on Telegram. I think that it would be cooler if you were a part of. And then in general, yeah, there's a few things that are on this kind of wave. And we'll put some links to that. If anyone's interested who does like that kind of research.
Chat.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm getting it now, and I should be able to give myself a sign in here while the show is going. So hopefully, I can check out that stuff because man, I really need to be talking to other people doing this stuff.
Speaking of which, does anybody have any?
You'd be talking nonstop. Literally, the conversation is around the clock. Right now, Jeremy's asking about Hal Puthoff and Jack Sarfati, I think it was. And basically, there's this girl, Amy, from the Institute. And she gets on every once in a while and types for forever. And her father worked in NASA on some anti-gravity stuff, and she's real deep into it. And literally all of the names, she knows them all. And she'll tell you who's inside her, who's not, who's telling the truth, who's on it, who's not. And she claims to actually have working anti-gravity.
Yeah, we're gonna have her on hopefully really soon. She's like really interesting.
If you get her on, that would be amazing.
Dude, well, you remember the thing she said? The first thing that triggered you and me were both like triggered because she said like, what was it? It was like, what's the value of doing anti-gravity or something like that? Like, you know, can you think of a value metric?
You don't release it.
Exactly, and it was like, so real. Yeah.
Jeremiah, did you download it yet?
It's downloading right now still. Well, it's actually downloaded. It's verifying it. So hopefully we'll get this installed going.
I wanted to check out in the chat if there's anybody who has any questions about anything. We're talking about ions, talking about electricity, talking about thorium, talking about nuclear, talking about science. How about like any of the stuff? A bit of confusion, says Jimbo. Oh, because I call the show Remote View, Jimbo, because we're all remote and we're viewing the show. But you know what? If you want to talk about remote viewing, we can do that. Like that's not
actually Hal Puthoff's thing. Remote viewing is what Hal Puthoff has written several books on. He worked with the CIA in remote viewing. It's a real thing. And the crazy thing is that pretty much everybody has this capability. It's an innate ability, and they've yet to find anybody who does not have it, according to some of their papers. It's like insane.
So this is something I thought about earlier today on the Discord. We were talking together. I think Twilight, Miss, and Brett, and NY Sync, and Queenie were there. And one of the things that we were talking about was in school. Oh, it was even Oracle Raven. They told him that you didn't do the answer in math class if you didn't show the work. But a lot of the time, you can just psychically view the answer. You know, I mean, you could get it not just by guessing, but like literally, you just. So there's the 100th monkey. So they tried to in school break down your psychic 100th monkey capacity, so you don't accidentally awaken that, because so many people can find that they actually have this ability to see things. And in terms of anti-gravity, there's another thing we were talking about recently, which is the idea of passing through things, going through walls, going in between.
Oh, phasing into like a different dimensional space. So your matter can be simultaneously where other matter is, but not interacts.
I actually have a theory about that. The way I see it is there really is only 3 dimensions of space, but what happens is you get into extra dimensions of time. And by phasing in and out of the time dimensions, you can travel through walls, you can travel through space-time, you can travel through different instances of space-time, of the space-time continuum, like the timeline of your life. You're able to go through different instances of your lifetimes, of your reincarnations. And you're able to go through different orientations of the subatomic molecules that make up the universe. You could have multi-universes with different ratios between hydrogen and helium that form different types of stars and form different types of periodic tables. So you could have literally there is a multiverse of options going on there, and by tuning into one that's just slightly off of ours, you'll be able to travel through walls.
That's an interesting theory.
You think that makes sense to you, Jeremiah? What do you think about it?
I would disagree in 3 spatial dimensions. I'm quite confident that we have more than 3 spatial dimensions, but I think in order to make that make sense, let me explain. Okay, so if we consider what 1 inch is, if we say compensate for the distance and perspective shift, we should be able to measure pretty well via triangulation an inch. So if we're 5 feet away and we have 2 points that we're looking at a space 1 inch long, we should be able to tell from the side how long that is, right? The fact that you can saturate space with energy means that the measurement of 1 inch from any given distance via triangulation can change. So if I put a ton of RF energy into the space of a ruler and I'm looking at that with my 2 eyes, I'm going to see that ruler shrink. So this would be a spatial dimension that changes, meaning that it's not linear. And so I would say the fact that space has a different density and a different volumetric a different volumetric factor means that you could pretty much call that another dimension, which is how much space do you have in space. And you can say that it's time too, because yeah, there's more time that takes place here, but there's actually also more physical space now present in that area, and you can turn that space on and off, make it disappear or reappear. So I would consider that a dimension because it's different than just simply the flow rate of time. It's not that things just simply move slower through it. I mean, it changes optical properties and everything else that we would consider to be dimensional property of three-dimensional space, which means that it doesn't fit into the three-dimensional metric.
You're talking about the ether.
I'm talking about effectively what hyperspace physics in today's terms, but yeah, where you have small pockets of space which have a different volume or energy density within themselves than the surrounding space. Meaning that 1 inch here is not the same as 1 inch on Mars or same as 1 inch in the Pleiades system. Those things, if you look at them from the other systems, will change.
So someone just said, wait, you want to go ahead, Ben?
Do you think that if your theory is right about that hyperspatial type of, field, would that cause the cosmological background? Like, I mean, 0 point energy where they.
Oh, he's exactly right, man. He's exactly right. Yeah, I wish I was on this chat to see this. He's exactly right. The cosmological background radiation is the defining factor that sets up how much space is in any volume of space.
Yeah, in hyperspace.
Oh wow! So I just popped open YouTube again, and just the comments are flying all in at once. I guess it's like scrolling them for me so I can get up.
Space is full was kind of the
invisible space.
Yeah, space is full was kind of the bumper sticker, and I felt like that was
absolutely. Space only exists because there's energy in motion, and without that energy in motion, we don't have a separation or distance or time flow or anything like that.
Yeah, and another interesting thing, in response also to the last conversation we had, because there are some people that believe that, in terms of Vedic cosmology and metaphysics, that space is filled with predominantly water. But if you start looking into it, like, what is water after all? How big is space? Like, there's actually so much broadness. There's density in terms of different kinds of elements that exist in space.
What is a description of something with properties?
There could be plasmoid water asteroids, and then there's,
I think aether itself is,
or even just steam. Like steam, like what is steam and like cold steam in terms of space? Like a lot of space is a lot more than just a vacuum, from our understanding.
All space is more than just a vacuum. I mean, it's filled with radio energy, and there was quite the phenomena when we first discovered it. Actually, Tesla was one of the first people to ever discover it. He stuck a receiver, very powerful receiver, onto a tune antenna array and was listening to the sounds of other planets. And he was one of the first people to discover the huge amount of EM radiation. He didn't know where it was coming from or what it was. He just knew that it was available 24/7, and it seemed to be more prominent during the day. Which makes sense because 24/7 we have the cosmic radiation hitting the planet, and that energy is coming in. But during the daytime, we also have solar high energy particle radiation that adds to that whole metric. And he said that there was basically an inexhaustible source of energy if it could be tapped. And this is the thing that he refers to as the wheelwork of nature, the fundamental basis by which all things operate. And that one day he hopes man can connect their machinery directly to it and power their machinery from it.
That's some type 1 stuff.
So do you think that then, all right, so space is full. So if there's any kind of qualities then that are dividing zones, like what is it about our stratosphere or ionosphere or the Van Allen belt, or like what is it that's keeping there's sort of this divisiveness between? Is there a divisiveness? I mean, it seems like the moon's in our atmosphere now. How do we just define this? The difference? Is there a difference?
You can call the difference density. You can call it. You can measure the difference in relative speed of light, which means obviously if you try to measure the speed of light wherever you're at, it's always going to be the same. But if you look at it from an outside perspective, then you can measure a change. And so these are all ways in which we can observe this phenomena, which is, at this point, it's not a theory, it's a well-recognized phenomenon. And it's the reason why light bends around planets. It's the reason why gravity can and does exist at all. Gravity still isn't explained. It's still considered a force by mainstream physics, but if you actually ask any physicist what gravity is, they're going to pretty much throw their hands up and tell you they have no idea that it's a force, and that's what it is. So amongst those people who do understand it, there's a pretty good consensus that it has a solid foundation in extra-dimensional physics, specifically what we're talking about, which is the density of space and time. And I don't think we need to get esoteric or anything to understand the physics behind it.
Right. Do you did you see the NASA article recently about both? Okay, there's two ones. One was the Forbes article that was saying that
Forbes too.
Scientific proof is a myth, and with their article, let me send you the link to this one.
I haven't seen that yet.
I'll throw it up your direction. This is an interesting article because they started talking about the idea of empiricism, and I have to close my ad blocker. I hate that.
Well, who owns Forbes? Isn't it like Murdoch?
Probably. But it's pretty interesting because it talks about how things are changing all the time. Reality is complicated. Different metrics are only good in different moments. And so there's ways that we can start to interpret reality. And there's also changes to how reality will work at different cosmic epochs. And right now we're at a point where we're starting to mess with gravity, mess with electricity, mess with so many things that they're going to mess with the evolution of forces. And as that happens, then the rules will have to change, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how far I go into that article. I mean, we're not going to change the fundamental nature of the universe, and everything that we're doing is discovery. It's not modification. Like discovering a force that can counter gravity or discovering a phenomena that can negate gravity isn't changing the rules of the universe. It's looking at something that is there and has always been there, and we were just too much like monkeys to see it. So our lack of aptitude and ability to observe the universe as it is doesn't mean that when we finally make that observation and dabble with some atoms and cram them together in a particular configuration to affect what's already there, we're not making anything new, and we can't. We're just simply using what's already there. In fact, as far as I know, humans have never really made anything unless you want to count antimatter or something. We made antimatter out of matter anyway, so we didn't make that. I don't think we really make anything. We just put stuff together.
Well, so some of the reasons I find it interesting mainly is that we're finding the rules that we're living by are changing. Like the other day, NASA had said, NASA stunned, physics broken, claim revealed after impossible engine works, referring to the
EM drive.
I hear what they released about that.
And it was just funny the way they put it because
said they got positive results, but they hypothesized it's a magnetic, it's interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, and so they have to redo the experiments with magnetic shield. So they don't.
Well, the M drive pushes against space-time saturation. It's one of those phenomena that's well explained with the Lorentz transform equations, but for some reason isn't recognized by mainstream physics as an area of study. The Lorentz transform already tells us you cram RF radiation into a volume of space and you interact it against itself, it's going to act exactly like two sound waves constructively or destructively interferencing, or like two laser beams that constructively or destructively
getting pressure.
There's actually an article that has to do with the subject, and it's there's two of them. One is the case of the appearing and disappearing particle, and there's another study that was done, I think, at MIT, and they claim to make photons temporarily invisible. As in, they would send 3 laser beams into the same volume of space. They'd cross at slightly different angles, and they'd be phased in a specific way, all the same wavelength. And at the area where the 3 laser beams would come into a phase conjugate, we would measure an amplitude of 0, meaning there was no photonic energy in that volume of space. But then, as soon as the photons exit the volume of space, they reappear with all their original properties, and we can measure them again. So why did they disappear? Well, that's simple. One photon has a positive wavefront lined up with another photon's negative wavefront, and when these two things interact and we try to measure at the center point of the two wavefronts, of course, we have a positive and negative of equal potential because they're both split from the same beam. We measure nothing. Yeah. It's not surprising that the beam disappears.
Did you say it was 2 beams or 3?
3 beams. The original experiment was 3 beams. But you can do it with 2 as well. You have to dissolve one of the 2 beams in the surface of something else, meaning you have to have some kind of material to interact with. but 3 beams allows you to negate that material entirely and just make a direct measurement of the phenomena. They figured, and it's kind of funny too, the students were talking about how they don't think that anything is ever going to come out of the technology and it'll probably never go anywhere. And I would agree with them because it's not really useful in any particular way. What it is interesting because it makes use of a known phenomena, which should be mainstream science, exactly what we were talking about, which is how you can change the properties of space and the way the photons interact with RF radiation. And in this case, the RF radiation source is the photons themselves. But it's interesting because it operates by a principle that's well understood, yet it's supposed to be something fantastic and new. But it's not. And I don't know why we keep on rediscovering the same things again and again, giving them different names, and then thinking that we're getting somewhere when we're really just redoing old experiments that were done in like the 70s.
Advertising.
I don't think MIT needs to advertise, though.
Jeremiah, have you seen this video from Todd DeCiato about engineering model of quantum gravity?
No.
I added it to the chat here.
Thanks.
On this guy contacted me, and basically he's doing something very similar to the Alzaphan experiment, and he has similar ideas, and he talks about polarizable vacuum, how we're adding energy to the ether and removing energy from the ether. That's how we create warp drive, and we do this by orienting the subatomic particles.
This sounds perfect.
All about the methodology that we have. He's an engineer doing this for I don't know how many years. He claims to have a whole bunch of credentials. He's skeptical about our methodology of doing it, but he does believe that it is possible, and that's a warp drive.
Well, if he comes from a metrology background, then it makes perfect sense why he'd be skeptical, because I came from a calibration background with 8.5 years of industry experience, and I can tell you a lot of my bias towards the methods that we currently use comes from that experience, because I basically became an industry-leading expert in taking measurements correctly and knowing how to use that equipment and understanding the contributing factors. So once you know that stuff and you watch somebody perform an experiment where they haven't considered any of the major contributing factors, all you can really do is shake your head at it. Because they are coming from a 4 to 8 year education, and they haven't learned the fundamentals of how to take a good measurement.
Yeah, it's probably the last good thing you can get out of school. You know, they give a lot of ideology and a lot of wrong answers, but they will teach you sometimes how to use equipment to make good metrics. And data informatics, I think, is a good science to still believe in. Granted, sometimes the information might be augmented by things, so it's a great thing to have a lens and have multiple metrics that you can. Are you soldering right now?
I am.
You're so cool,
Jeremiah.
What are you soldering right now, man? Are you working on the Tesla coils?
Yeah. I blew a MOSFET. Try to screw with it. The problem is, like I said, it doesn't stop at 100%. It goes to 300%. And my little light bulb trick there, I actually blew it out. So I'm just going ahead and replacing them now.
Transistor.
It's MOSFET, right? Like, I mean,
it's a power.
Yeah, I started to say transistor, and then I corrected myself. I mean, a MOSFET is a type of transistor, but at this point, it's been so well developed, it really deserves to be called a class of its own.
So you guys want to maybe explain a little bit about, like, the MOSFET's a pretty interesting little thing. I mean,
basically, think of them as 3-pronged relays. One prong you provide a plus or a flat voltage, and on the other 2 prongs you get continuity or you get nothing. It's sort of like a solid state relay with just 1 prong for one connection for the switch, for the on and off.
Mm-hmm.
So the MOSFET semiconductor was created
for the history
in 1948. It was patented right after the guys involved with the MJ12 team that were involved with Roswell.
I did not know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
it's all in that show Taken by Spielberg, man.
You'll love it.
So, yeah.
You should look into the MJ12 document team, because there's several people involved with making the thing. Basically, it took more than 6 months, and it took about 10 years to get to the kind that we use today. But within a year, they were able to get something running. But they needed other kinds of material, and the story is basically Terminator 2. They're like, "What is this thing?" And it's stuck to the computer with Velcro. What the hell is this stuff? And like they had to like literally invent Velcro and invent. Well, this is the story. You know, reverse engineer Velcro, reverse engineer silicone wafers, and all the parts, all the different materials. in order to create the first MOSFET.
And we got fiber optics out of that tech too, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah.
So that's
I'm
a
stunning fiber.
so that's like a question
A lot
that
of
like
stuff.
kind of I can't help but ask at some point as like, what do you think about Roswell? I think Roswell is a pretty important change in our society. Once it happens, society looks at things differently. What do you think it's all about?
What do I think Roswell's about, or what do I think the societal change is about?
A little bit of both, I guess. I mean, you know.
That's
Wait, hold on.
step-up
Also, you want to talk about your
transformer.
gigabit Ethernet board, or what are we looking at right
That's
now?
a TV, right? Old tube TV, or is it custom?
Oh, that's from your
Oh,
series.
sorry. Yeah, I've just got a board here. I'm gonna pull some diodes off of it. This entire everything that I showed you guys earlier was built from like crap that I pulled off of old circuit boards. So
From a TV, or what was that? Was it a board?
yeah, this is a Sony Trinitron. These TVs are like stupidly beastie. They have so many components on these boards, and they're just loaded. They also have several hundred feet of copper or aluminum wire. It used to be just copper. Now they're using aluminum wire.
Huh.
They were using aluminum wire back when they made CRTs. But yeah, the Sony Trinitron CRT TVs are some of the best for TV parts back in the CRT era.
He had the best TVs for like over 10 or 15 years. It's like well known back then.
I know my grandfather had one for a reason. He must have been about some on the inside.
Yeah, these things are really decent. I mean, I can't complain as far as getting parts out of them. The fact that you can make a Tesla coil out of Sony Trinitrons and Xboxes is pretty interesting.
Maybe if you can't get a manufacturer by Christmas, sell the design, sell the plan. Seriously, make a PDF.
No, I'm definitely going to do a kit. I mean, it is something that you could build at home out of crap parts, but I think that based on my experience with the whole magic wand video, I put all the information out about that thing. I showed everybody what I put inside of it and how it worked, and so far I've had like over, I want to say like 100 people contact me wanting to buy one. I've had at least 15 people contact me, and I've given them personal advice on how to build one. Even though I had a video out there on how to build one, I give them personal advice and helps and hinters, amounting to probably about, I want to say, maybe 60 hours of total help for other people. And so far, 0 other people have been able to do it. And that, to me, is really kind of confounding because it's nothing but a voltage multiplier, a CPS oscillator, a tiny transformer, and a battery pack. Right? That's it. That's the whole friggin' original WAN V1.0 driver without the new electronics in it, like I have in V3.0 now. And nobody's been able to do that simple thing. And so if I give the information out there, people will be interested, but I think I need to give them a kit.
Yeah, you're right.
Get those parts because they're not going to know where to get them, and they're not going to have an Xbox 360 sitting around to pull pieces off of and all that stuff. There it is. Okay.
You could sell it's too bad it's not the 50s because you put this in the back of a magazine, like how to build a hovercraft out of a vacuum cleaner.
I did that one.
You know what I mean? Yeah, we totally would have bought that.
I remember seeing something like that. I actually did build a hovercraft out of a Hoover vacuum. Those things have beastie little impellers do. They're like 15 or 16 amp brush motors. They get up to about 14,000 RPMs, and you can easily lift 180 pounds with them.
I used to think I was trouble as a kid, but it sounds kind of like you're beating me here.
I don't know if I was. I guess I could say I was troubled as a kid, but I would say I was more trouble as a kid.
No, that's right. I'm not troubled. Troublesome. Just having a hovercraft. Juvenile on a hovercraft is everyone's nightmare about the future. Really, is just a kid on a hovercraft. It's literally everything people fear.
Yeah. Well, I got banned from so many freaking houses, dude. All of neighborhood parents thought I was going to teach their kids how to build explosives and shit.
It's the same, man.
Come on, guys. I'm just teaching your kids how to do science. It's not like it has to catch fire. You know, that's just TV. Even though we're doing stuff that catches fire.
It's quite safe.
It's hard to get, the real trick is teaching kids how to want to do creative things that are not destructive. Once you get people excited about other things, then it's easy. But, until then, it can be hard for them to see how you're going to get these kids to want to do more than just break stuff.
Yeah, we spend all our time telling kids what they can't do, though, and we don't spend anywhere near enough time telling them what they can.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, yeah, if you told the kid you could make an Xbox into a Tesla coil, you probably would think about life differently. It's true.
Yeah, if somebody told me as a little kid, hey, all you got to do is study science and you can have superpowers for real, I'd be like, hell yeah. And what kid is going to say no to that? No, I don't want superpowers.
Yeah, screw you, man. Yeah, that's true. Once you're about 15, they're just constantly
chasing girls. After that, I don't care.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is like the few times of disappointment let's say you order something and it arrives and it's like it's not really aliens, it's sea monkeys or aqua dragons, they're calling it. That's going to cause you to believe less, and over time, like you're going to start being oppositional to believing anything's possible, which is
I agree with enough disappointment and being deceived. You start to get really skeptical, and it's easy to go completely cynic and just disbelieve it all.
Yeah, just separate from the whole movement.
But I guarantee you that's very intentional in some cases. That's the basis of disinformation, after all, right? It's not hiding information. It's providing information that's plentiful but inaccurate. And that's why it works, because it's just true enough to get you invested emotionally, but not true enough to give you anything to work with.
Use practical.
So also we've got like, I think we've hitting a pretty good number of people. It's like 50 or something. So what do you guys in watching? Is there any questions about anything that you have? Type them into the comments and we'll answer some of that stuff. Like, you know, parenting tips.
Yeah, that'd be a question for Mark, not me, man. Thank God I don't have a kid. I am not set out to take care of another human being. I pretty much just have myself to worry about.
You know, I feel like all the good ones say that. That's the deal. Everybody's like, no. Let someone else. I feel like Mark, you know, similarly, he's like, I don't know if I'm doing a great job all the time. It's like, yeah, you are. That's literally like the exact right person to be a parent. Somebody's trying.
Well, Mark's first priority before he went on the show was to take care of his kids, and he made it pretty clear. So the fact is, he's being there as a father, and he's doing what he's supposed to do. And it's a shame that fairly common thing that we think should be what all parents do is the rarity these days. Being there for your kids and actually supporting them, building up their confidence, making them believe that they can genuinely do anything they want to. All that stuff seems to have gone the wayside now, and it's really sad. I know so many kids that I went to school with back in the day that had huge dreams and aspirations, and it's funny because culturally they would even lie about the things that they were doing or that they had done just to kind of gain that public glamour, and now they don't even care. It's the desire to be more than just another student or just another kid seems to be leaving. And I don't know where the individuality has gone. I know my sister has just recently graduated high school, and she's now making her way into the military. And being about 7 years before her as a student and seeing what my school experience was like compared to what she told me about, it's really changed a lot, and it's gotten pretty horrible.
It's bad now. It's way
gone. Shop class, gone. Economics, whittled down to basically being useless. What do you learn in school anymore? What useful thing that you can apply directly into your adult life do you learn in school?
How to avoid a school shooting by getting in line with everybody else, probably.
Yeah, they make schools, they design them like
it kind of makes me want to like open up my own school sometimes when I think about it. The kind of shit they're teaching kids.
Well, it's so much easier to do that now. It's so crazy that parents aren't doing that more. All you got to do is you get 4 sets of parents together, and you've got enough money to get tutors, like young teachers just got their degree, and you can have them teach 5 kids at once. You know, you could have four or 5 kids at once, and you have a micro school. And people have been doing this since the 70s and the 80s. You get, you know, each parent takes one of the, you know, classes basically, and they're responsible for it. But then other kids and other parents are piggybacking. So you have they work together for 4 or 5 different subjects to be learned. And
I wouldn't want to be a teacher. Maybe I'll be.
You don't have to always be the teacher. You might actually find out you're great at it, because that's the thing that's funny is actually I can teach engineering or math or whatever. But yeah, a lot of what it is you're paying for a teacher, and so each parent provides a paid for teacher to be part of the school. So you have 5 teachers paid for, and then that all of a sudden you
be like a co-op.
It's a co-op, and it's not to make money off parents, and that's the difference about that versus building a real school.
Absolutely. Yeah, because these teachers, if they don't get the approval of their parents and give the students quality education, the parents are going to pretty much fire them. And
that's another sad truth.
It's true.
Well, the fact that you would have to do your job in order to keep your job, I don't think is sad at all. I think that it's
that's
sad that we don't have that.
That's what I mean. That's the scary thing is like what we're living in right now is the opposite of that, and so people get trapped in this paradigm, and then they're scared of learning things. They're scared of having the kids know these things because they don't know how to teach them, you know. Whereas what we could do is just like help kids learn on the internet, and we just keep watching them. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who would come meet me once a week for an hour. And he would tell me, "Oh, what did you do this week?" And I'd tell him what I did. And he'd ask me, "What was I gonna do next week?" And I'd make a list of plans of things I was gonna. I don't know about this. I want to learn about this. And then I'd, next week tell him how I did. It was just like a progress report. I mean, that's all you need from school.
That America spends the most of any country in the world on education, and it's not by a little bit; it's by a long shot. I think England is the next, but we're like double. And really, the only thing that needs to change in America for the betterment of education, to make it happen generically, would be to change over the system from public schools to voucher system,
Right?
Where every kid has a voucher on his head, following around, so that you can go send him to whatever private school you want.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I think that they obviously are trying to homogenize the prison
The whole
state of
thing.
education.
Yeah,
They don't want you to have access to that.
What was that education act that passed where they have to have a uniform education?
No Child Left Behind.
A bunch of
No.
them. Like
Yeah.
every state has to teach.
That was just another trick to get more money for the teachers, for the school administrators. They even have in these high schools, they have white rooms where teachers that they can't fire, they can't get rid of them because of all the union laws. They have to keep on paying them so long as they show up.
I mean, the sad thing is there's a lot of really nice, like the thing is in the front, kind of like in the front lines of the soldiers, you put the teachers, the kindergarten teachers, you put all the nice people, all the pets for the pet causes go in the front to defend what is really in the background. Stealing, I think, $100, you maybe get $3 of those dollars go to a school. I mean, it's crazy how much money is stolen, and most of that money is going to a corporation, book publishing company. And most schools don't have, you have to understand, like California has its own special schooling district. Texas has its own special schooling district. The rest of the U.S. is all kind of, for the most part, lumped into this pseudo hellish system. It's pretty bad, and the books are published by the McGraw-Hill Company, so that you have to buy them again and again every year.
Textbooks are a monopoly.
Wisconsin and I think Ohio are doing something really nice. They're moving over to a voucher system. So
Nice.
We'll see on a state-to-state basis how it happens. Actually, it's one of the reasons why a buddy of mine moved to Milwaukee, because of the voucher system. It's really a game changer when it comes to getting alternative education and having real choice in where you send your kids.
Your buddy moved to Milwaukee, eh?
Yeah, not you. There's another buddy in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'm wondering who this guy is and if he is studying this kind of stuff or not. Probably not.
No, when I told him about this stuff, he went off the deep end. He couldn't take it. He went into depression because
It's all about it.
right now.
I'm about to pop this back together. I just figured I'll show you what's inside of it, just so you can kind of see the driver board well. I've got it apart. So that's that little circuit board there at the base of the coil. That's the entire power circuitry right there. And so you can imagine this can be made pretty damn light and pretty damn small.
Is that a micro transformer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's let's see, we've got a CT that's a 3-to-1 ratio that converts the secondary feedback to a gate drive signal. So the secondary in this case, instead of being grounded, it gets grounded eventually, but it first passes through a current transformer, and that gives direct gate drive voltage to the gates of the MOSFETs, turning them on and off. So the secondary itself, based on its resonance frequency, it will do all the power switching and provide the power. The circuit, all it does is just give a little bit of a gate bias to kind of get them started, but after that, the secondary feedback takes over completely, and no other power is provided. Interestingly enough, if the secondary feedback is greater than the power supply voltage, it gets fed back into the circuit and recycled for reuse. And it does this every cycle. It's probably why I get an hour of battery life out of it.
Wow.
Are we talking about what you call that?
Lightsaber? What?
No.
No, I do have one of those, and that's an entirely different project. I would consider a 3 kilowatt 10-inch plasma blade to be pretty decent, considering that you normally need quite a bit more. Now, mind you, I did find a way to stretch it out so it's not as hot. I don't get that 10,000 degree plasma. I get a nice 5,000, 4,000 degree plasma, but still 8 to 10 inches of a blade is totally sufficient, in my opinion, for at least a good starting point. And that's only a half-inch wide. I know it's not the like
But you
3/4 inch to 1 inch wide.
But you can't hit against another blade with it unless you have a. It has to be like a. There's a new lightsaber toy, not toy, but it's got a rod, and then so it has plasma.
Are you talking about plasma? You said.
Say it again. Yeah, I think it's plasma. Plasma on the outside of a bronze rod, and then the rod itself would clank against another rod because otherwise you would just pass through itself.
I have not. I've not seen this. I've seen one by Make It Real, Hackersmith or whatever that guy's name is. Anyways, I seen his super hot tungsten blade lightsaber that just crams tons of current into that thing, and you can melt through stuff. It's nothing close to impressive, but it's really hot.
Yeah, here's the first proto saber, and it's very close to
Yep, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we watched it.
It was interesting. It wasn't useful, but it was interesting.
Right.
Clicks.
But okay, wait, also there were some questions to answer. Someone let's see here. Oh, I went too far back. One mountain cat asked, do you all get drops from Jesus? Do you mean, are we like Muhammad talking to Christ,
like,
or are we taking LSD that
what
we
they
get
call
from
channeling or
yeah, sorry, I checked with Jesus, and he's not available at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think he's giving
someone
us
can give me the radio
LSD.
Jeremiah, tell them about your connection with Nikola Tesla when you had a question for him.
That was interesting. Okay, so I'll tell you guys a story. I want you to take this with a pillar of salt, because this is just my personal story and it's speculation, but I believe that I got somewhere with this. So here we go. I was researching Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, and I got stuck at a point. I was trying to understand, how might it be that Wardenclyffe was able to generate power? How might it be that Wardenclyffe was able to operate resonantly in a high efficiency mode? And I had really complicated questions that I wasn't finding answers to online. The closest thing that I had was Eric Dollard's stuff, and he doesn't really go into magnifiers or anything like that. And the days of Richard Hall and TCBOR are long gone. So I was pretty much on my own working in the lab, and I decided, okay, I know that there's this crazy thing that people call the Akashic Records, and supposedly there is the essence or mentality of dead people there that you can ask questions about, because the theory goes our thoughts continue as like a reverberation or an echo in the Earth's magnetic field pretty much forever, and it somehow has to do with planet Earth. And anyways, all very weird kind of woo-woo stuff. Not a whole lot of science per se behind it. You can't stick a meter on this. So I said, what the hell? I'm an investigator, I'm a scientist, and I like evidence, and I use measurement equipment, but sometimes you have to delve into an area where you don't know much about and try stuff. So I'm like, fuck it. I've done meditation. I've done some other weird esoteric things. Let's try this. So I decided to meditate, spent quite a while getting myself into the right mode and quiet my mind. And then I said in my mind out loud, I'm looking for the essence of Nikola Tesla. I have questions about your technology. And so I waited like 30 or 40 seconds for my mind to give me something, and I got pretty much nothing. And I tried again, and I got this sensation of a connection. And then I had a huge amount of information pouring in my head. And it was in the form of a diagram and a bunch of, like, if I were to look at any part of the diagram in my head, I would get all this other information about what it did and how it worked. And so I built a little magnifying transmitter based on this diagram. And it was a, what was it? I think it was a 6 megahertz coil, really high frequency, 1.2 kilowatt transmitter, spark gap fed at 20,000 volt DC, a pretty unusual type of Tesla coil. So I ran it, and instead of getting the normal purplish, like bluish arcs that we're used to seeing that are thin and wispy and loud, I got these very red colored, very fuzzy arcs coming off the top. And the transmission range I had from this thing was just friggin' incredible. I've got a handheld version of it that I showed a couple of shows ago, and it only outputs 3 or 4 inch sparks, but I can light up fluorescent tubes from almost 7 feet away with it. And so my big transmitter, the 1.2 kilowatt version that runs off line voltage, outperformed everything that I'd ever seen a Tesla coil do. The peak voltage was well into the many megavolts, even though I didn't have sparks that were all that long. but those sparks were surrounded by a corona that I have never seen before. And all this just came right out as diagrams in my head after attempting to contact the essence of Nikola Tesla.
Oh, and tell me about the explanation of how you saw the Wardenclyffe Towers sort of grabbing ionized energy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I also asked, that was my first question, is how did it work? And I got that. And then I asked the second question, how did it draw energy? And that's when I seen this beam of energy coming off the top of Wardenclyffe Tower as a finished unit. In my head, the cupola was finished. It was beautiful, and there was this beam coming out of it that connected to the ionosphere as high as you could see. You just looked into the sky, and you just seen this beam shooting straight up from the tower. And I got this, I will call it an understanding, not so much of a technical explanation, that during the existence of this beam, when the coil is on one of its cycles, and it's on the negative output, that positive ions get drawn in. Now, mind you, this understanding came from a previous back knowledge of Feynman's information and already knowing that positive ions rain down from the atmosphere. So that's something that I was aware of before I had this idea pop into my head. I don't know if it would have made sense without that prior knowledge. Anyways, once it did, though, I got this image that ions during the negative side of the Tesla coil's high voltage output cycle would be drawn in, and during the positive side, the positive ions would basically be halted. They won't be pushed back so much because they're already drawn towards the negative charge of the Earth's surface, but they just simply stop flowing downwards for a temporary period of time. And when the coil comes on, its potential is so much higher than all the surrounding area that as ions get channeled into the beam, the fact that they're moving in that direction, they generate some heat, which allows more conductivity in the atmosphere, which allows a greater range for the Tesla coil, which allows more ions from everywhere else to flow in. So not only did they flow in from this beam, but they also flow in from all the outside areas as well. And since they only enter during the negative side of the cycle, they add energy and they don't take away any energy from the positive side of the cycle because there is no ionization taking place.
I just want to make clear that people understand that this is not a free energy device.
Yeah, it's not free. This is basically a super solar device.
It's a super solar device. It's basically a gigantic solar panel, you can call it, that is receiving energy from the ionosphere, which ultimately comes from the sun. But this is only going to work during the day or into the early evening when the
keep in mind, Mark, too, that high energy particles don't just happen on the sun side of the planet. They circle all the way around, and any energy hitting the sun side of the planet, because the ionosphere is so conductive, is carried all the way around the periphery of the globe. So 24/7, no matter where your receiving transmitter is, you can connect to the ionosphere because those ions are still in transport. And even without the sun, we would still have energy because of high energy particles coming in from space.
But wouldn't the daylight side of Earth get more energy per square meter than the dark side of Earth?
It does. The daylight side of Earth gets about 400 kilovolts at 700 megawatts. And the dark side of Earth, just from solar reflected radiation coming back around the ionosphere as a direct input, ends up getting something like 20 to 50 kilovolts of extra added energy in the same time, and maybe I want to say fractionally small amount of power. But it's still available.
Power is there available in the ionosphere? Are we talking megawatts for the entire planet? We're talking gigawatts, terawatts?
For the entire planet, Feynman students estimated around 700 million watts for the whole planet, which is obviously not a lot by today's standards, considering how much power we draw. But here's the thing that Tesla theorized, is that even though there was a known amount of energy, even though Feynman students long after Tesla had estimated based on their measurements what it might be, and even though we still don't know, what Tesla theorized was these high energy particles coming from the sun enter the upper ionosphere at whatever rate is allowed based on the drain rate of the ions going down. So as in, if you take a lot of positive ions out of the ionosphere, the positive particles coming in don't have any restrictions, so they come in faster, and basically this battery refills itself faster than you can drain it. So maybe it's 700 megawatts today, but if we use 700 megawatts, then we should still have plenty of extra left over that's going to be coming in on the sun side of Earth.
Jeremiah, did you study telluric currents and lightning sprites? Because that all seems.
I did study both of those things quite extensively.
Yeah.
Yeah, sprites are kind of interesting, especially when we're talking about Wardenclyffe Towers, because they connect with the ionosphere as well. And they seem to be a sort of control rod that balances out the lightning strike to the ground with the ionosphere, allows the entire system to go into symbiosis.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in looking at have we done anything with this up to this point? There's this company, I believe they're called Ion Power Corp or something like that. I'm sure if you just type on Ion Power, you can find it. Anyways, they make these nano-coated wires they hang all over the place around their facility. And they are some 30 feet up, I think, in the original prototype that I seen video years ago. But they were talking about plans to build one that was 100 feet and then some 300 feet. So my guess is by this point, they probably built all those things and have fully idealized them. At the time that I watched their initial video, they already had a bank of like 7 huge high-voltage capacitors, and they were running a fan motor and a couple other things off of it, including some small lights. But by this point, I would imagine they're running quite a bit more. And this is just capturing ions from a very thin piece of wire that has a bunch of spikes of carbon nanotubes sticking out of it that can pick up a fairly wide surface area. And this is a pretty small area by comparison, seeing as they're not priming it with any kind of charge, they're not catalyzing the flow of energy, and this is just pure DC, as in there's no resonant circuit, there is no kind of transmitter that helps this energy along. It's just purely received. And they're getting a usable amount of power out of it. So just imagine if you gave these ions a direction to go, if you gave them a little bit of an instruction via a couple megavolts of pulsed energy, you can foreseeably understand how much power could be available to you.
With.
Brittany says that you should create your own super breed of intelligent children, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I don't think I can be a scientist and a dad at the same time, though. I've got a pretty limited brain, and
Rick and Morty proves that
really, really well. But you try to give it like 2 or 3 things at once, and it starts to stutter.
Yeah.
So like I know where my areas of expertise are, and I know what I'm good at, but I also know where I suck. And multiple tasks at once is definitely one of those things. And kids are all that and then some.
Okay, the other thing was someone said copper, zinc, iron dreamcatcher. Then there was more stuff.
88 Shisho asked me what color was the beam, and the beam was a reddish. It was like a blue with a reddish hue around the outside.
Didn't when Eric Dollard talks about one of his first replications that he had that red corona
Nitrogen
stuff? Like you were reproduced?
Let's see. I don't remember red corona. I do remember the cosmic induction generator.
Yeah,
that
that's
was
what he called it.
Mm-hmm. But that was, he was using evacuated vessels like light bulbs and various things like that. And because the field was so strong between these 2 transmitters, he had strange phenomena that would appear in that area. The old scientist on YouTube attempted to replicate one of these plasma ball experiments with a bipolar Tesla coil, 2 spherical electrodes, non-arcing, as in no plasma output, and just he stuck the plasma ball between them. And just like Dollard was describing, this plasma doesn't tend to stretch from one side of the ball to the other. It sort of starts somewhere within the gaseous volume, and it looks like an entity unto its own. You can't.
It's like attracted to the electrodes?
No electrodes at all, just field.
Oh.
That's what makes it interesting. The lack of electrodes allows the gas to act exactly as it does, and the more energy it gains, up to the point of the plasma is now using all of the RF energy received. If there's no more RF energy and the plasma ball is of a certain size, it's not going to get bigger. It's just going to look like it's self-sustaining as long as you feed it energy. Just like putting a match in the microwave and having a plasma ball rise up out of that. Only this is a lot more stable, and you don't need gigahertz energy to do it.
Jeremiah, what do you think of this Wardenclyffe Tower in Texas? It looks like they're trying to build a
Yeah, they built it. It works. It's real, and it's something that's still currently under development. But yeah, this is it's exactly what it is. It looks like Wardenclyffe Tower because it is. The company finally came out and talked about what it was, and talked about how it's supposed to be used for transmitting communications with power. So they're trying to transmit a very high bandwidth signal that's up to today's modern standards for requirements of high bandwidth, but also provide the power to devices that would be corresponding with that bandwidth, receiving and transmitting on those frequencies. So they think they can do it, and apparently they've been successful enough to start talking about it publicly now. So that means they've made some strides. I think it's just a matter of time before we see this project fully realized.
Do you think it'll make the mainstream, or will it get like?
I think it will make the mainstream. It already has. Actually, I've watched a couple of news broadcasts from local news stations talking about this tower and what it might be, and then bringing Tesla into the mix and having some interviews from people who are at the company. So yeah, it's already hit the news. It's just not in a big way yet. And we're waiting for the final test to come through. And of course, what we want to see is somebody standing on the ground with a powered electronic device that has no batteries in it, and that device be online or communicating with some kind of reasonable bandwidth from that tower. And that's going to be what people will become wise to. Like, oh, wow, I don't have to ever charge my cell phone batteries again. This thing is actually working. This is great. Of course, people are going to take interest in it.
I know TED had a talk once about a resonant energy transfer, and they were just using coils, and they had like across the room difference. We're talking miles with this technology.
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah.
I wanted to really quickly address a couple of these. Tarek, yes, still in the news. We're in Connecticut right now, but I'm going January 1st to Bermuda Triangle to the tip, and we're going to be looking into the Bermuda Triangle a little bit. Also, if anyone has anything I should be looking into while I'm in Bermuda, for anything you're curious about, and I get back alive, I will totally let you know. But in the meantime, I can probably stream live from there.
Yeah, man, take a boat out into the center of the triangle with your magnetometer and RF energy meter, and also grab a methane meter and go ahead and try to measure the water, gas, methane levels.
Definitely got to get a rowboat.
That supposedly methane was decreasing the density of the water, and ships were no longer buoyant in it, and that's one of the reasons why they tend to go down. And apparently, methane was also affecting aeronautical vehicles. This is I don't actually believe that this has anything to do with the phenomenon of the triangle, but it was a really compelling theory.
There's been some interesting things about the depth, the kinds of materials, the underwater satellite images of pyramids in that region as well. There's some pretty good evidence. There's some civilization that's lost underwater there. So hoping to find out what's going on. Yeah, I know Twilight Mist, it's up north now, seemingly, from where I recall it being. But yeah, it's okay. I'll live with it. And that was one of the things. The other thing was Memory Man. Love you. Amoro's here. Tarek said that. Nathan, did you have something?
We should jump in.
It's really hard to get three people. One of them Jitsi.
Do it.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, Stuff Beagle. He's like, or maybe the elite will just blow it up like they did Tesla's tower. Well, here's the great thing about this project. It's being run entirely by military veterans. So these guys are already coming from that evil force that we're so afraid is going to tear it down. They're very well-trained RF engineers, and they have years and years of field experience and wartime experience as well. So these are hardened guys that have no intention of quitting, and the fact that they come from a government institution in the first place means they pretty much know how to play by the government rules.
Yeah. They know
Plus, they're not being independently funded by somebody like J.P. Morgan, which can just shut them down. These guys got funding from other sources which are much more secure, and I believe they also have established some government securities as well. So I believe this is one of those projects that we're going to really see come to fruition. Now, whether or not this will be available for everyone's use, I don't know. It could just be a purely military project. It could just be stuck in that zone and pulled off of public view. But I do know that they'll be successful with it, and that that's certainly not going to be torn down before that's fully realized.
Maybe as a last resort, they could open source the design if they can't get it.
They're pretty secretive about it. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, these are guys who are trained not to ever talk. And I'm pretty sure that for their own self-interest, they're going to do exactly what they're trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
One early radar system I was going to show at Starfort. I'm going to put that into the... I put in the wrong thing. But one of the things we were looking earlier into also is that some of these radar systems, they rely on different frequencies. Do you think that that's a reason why we're moving towards 5G, so that everything is easier to like interact on a chart, or that?
Yeah, we're moving towards 5G because our current technology just simply doesn't have the bandwidth for the amount of data that's flowing in and out of each router. There's too much information, and the noise floor is becoming a real problem. So here's the issue. This is an iPhone. This is an iPhone 5. It's a piece of crap. And I don't know if any of the other ones aren't pieces of crap, but I can tell you this. This thing has a little Wi-Fi transceiver inside of it, and it operates in the same frequency band as my microwave oven in the kitchen. It's only about 500 megahertz off. And that equals a real problem for this thing being able to receive signals, because the trouble is when I go into the middle of the city and I'm surrounded by 10,000 of these other devices just like this within a 1,000-foot radius, my phone cannot pick up the signal from the tower. The tower can hear it, but my phone can't hear the tower above the noise floor. And so by having 5G, it has such a limited range. It can't penetrate It doesn't have a very far reach, but it has an incredibly high bandwidth. And so we can't do it with single transmission towers anymore. We'll now have to distribute the 5G network with many, many transmitters all over the place. And it's not going to be really much different than like what Spectrum, Spectrum is doing. They used to be Time Warner, now they're Spectrum. And they have this whole Spectrum hotspot thing where anybody who has Spectrum's internet service and has a Spectrum enabled modem also has a effectively cell tower that you can communicate with your Spectrum enabled smartphone and not have to use your Wi-Fi cell service. And it's pretty much going to be the same way with 5G. The services will be integrated, and each piece of equipment that we're used to seeing just do one thing for us will now be part of the public terrain, and everybody can connect to it. But they won't be connecting to our personal network. They'll be connecting to the major network through our personal device that we won't have any rights to or own. We'll be renting those devices, just like we currently do with their routers and their modems.
Do you think
The
that?
infrastructure cost goes way down too.
Yeah. Do you think that with this
It's
kind of
offloaded to consumers.
when the consumers are the people that are building this network, do you think that there's going
Owning or
Is-
leasing
is
hardware.
controlling people, or is it having the network itself? Do you think? I'm trying to ask this question properly.
Mhm.
You know how the world? I saw an article a couple years back in New Yorker that was saying to the parents of university students, "Don't worry, mom and dad. We've stopped shooting your kids with plastic and rubber bullets. Now we're going to use, radiation, and it's going to make them feel uncomfortable, and they're going to
New
go
Yorker?
home."
Okay, there is a major epidemic going on right now, and the studies continue to increase up to the point of getting major public recognition that that RF radiation in that spectrum causes tissue heating within the first inch or so of the skin, and particularly within the first couple of millimeters. It can get through the skull into the brain. It can cause direct heating of the neural cortex inside the brain, the muscle or the fat tissues, things like that. So there's known possible damage from 5G already because of its high absorption and its low range. It doesn't pass through your body like the 2.4 gig would quite so far. It just pretty much sticks in you and gets completely absorbed.
Wow.
Wonderful.
So that's not a bad thing necessarily, because it means it's really, really easy to shield. In fact, it's never been more relevant to wear your tinfoil hat than now, because
What about-
completely block 5G. Wrap your 5G smartphone in tinfoil, you have zero signal. You take a 4 gigahertz smartphone and wrap it in tinfoil, you'll still get some signal.
What's your average microwave microwave oven run at?
2.35 gigahertz.
Yeah, that's why it interferes with those phones and stuff.
And this is only our cell phones are only 2.4 to 2.45 gigahertz, just like our routers are, ironically. Same waveband, FCC certified, and the same noise that we have to get through with our devices.
Mm-hmm. So also cell division, mitosis. I think your microtubule spindles are electrically charged. So is that going to be something affected?
I just generally think if you're causing your internal cell temperature, like, it's considered to be pretty dangerous to be having a fever of 100 degrees or more, right? That's only 2 degrees normal in the ambient average human body temperature.
Yeah, you dive at 105 or
So
more.
if 2 degrees in your entire body is enough to basically disable you completely and cause severe health detriments and other sicky-like effects, do we think that small areas of tissue being heated to the same increase in temperature, in some cases as much as 5 degrees or more, is any less dangerous just because we don't feel it all over our entire body?
Your body is going to try to react to that and cool down or trigger something it doesn't know how to deal with. 'Cause it's-
Exactly. It might not be the whole body all at once, so yeah, it can take away some heat, but the fact is that that area of tissue is still operating at a range that's not healthy for those cells. That doesn't allow the disposal of waste or the absorption of nutrients. It doesn't allow the proper flow of materials in and out of the cell walls. So the electrical signals really affect the ability of the cells to interact with the environment they're surrounded in, that they live in.
Yeah.
And this can be a real problem.
A lot of cellular structures and proteins are like electrically charged, and just like polar molecules, like water,
Oh, yeah. This is the whole thing behind the Royal Rife machine, and that's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to destructively oscillate through the exact same means that we're worried about 5G hurting us. It's supposed to hurt other microorganisms using a similar type of radiation at wave bands that affect those microorganisms, things like viruses, which have a much higher frequency than human cells, or things like bacterium, which have a much lower frequency than human cells, are highly susceptible to radio interference, and they will die. under the influence of the added heat that we can inject through RF radiation. And the only difference with 5G is it doesn't affect anything else really other than human cells. Most bacteria, most viruses are completely unaffected by that waveband, but we are really affected by that waveband. So it's kind of strange that this is the one that we're going to go with.
Do you
Have you seen the update from Space Warp Dynamics?
What do you say?
Have you seen the update from Space Warp Dynamics on their Apollo 13 lift experiment?
Okay, I'm looking at this on the screen now, yeah. Go on.
Well, basically, they claim to get around half a pound of thrust running at 800 watts.
Why? Wow, really?
Yeah,
Okay,
basically,
that is a hell of a lot.
they have RF frequencies emanating from these. Let's see if I can scroll in. I can't. But basically, they have these two antennas that are at 90 degrees to each other, so that the RF should cancel each other out, so long as it's at the right frequency, I'd assume. And that sort of energizes the polarizable vacuum or something like that. And the net result is that they have an output of, thrust of some sort. And here's the video of it actually happening. So you get
Really? Okay, I'm on Spaceport Dynamics Facebook page now, and I've not seen any of this.
Check it out. Here's the video of it moving.
Okay, I'm just going to follow your link. I do see it here too, but I'll go ahead back and I'll follow this link from, I think you're posting on what, YouTube? Where?
No, the one I posted on YouTube is something else. This is, here, and it actually goes up on Flames. But basically, the video shows shows their two 90-degree angled antennas. They're getting some RF frequency, and it's moving. They're showing you right now.
I remember seeing this technology years ago and knowing that it was something that was tangible. And I can't believe that the same company has actually got a working model now. Because last time I watched this, they were making a laser beam move like a millimeter or so up and down using one of these devices on a cantilever. Right, so this is a totally different ballgame now.
The device against the ruler. Into 1.5 millimeters. They claim it correlates to half a pound in thrust, but I don't know. If you had a half a pound in thrust, you'd be able to get it to move more than 1.5 millimeters, make it a little bit more of an exciting video to watch. But still, 1.5 millimeters, we're on our way to the stars.
But this still, so this, okay, I just found the video. It looks like a bunch of still frames or a bunch of pictures, and they're sort of talking about it.
That's in Facebook? Yeah,
that's the Facebook link. It's on clipsoon.com. One of them is, and the other one is somewhere else.
Yeah, they have the pictures of the setup on Facebook.
Yeah, this is their old video. That's a shame. This is actually stuff that they've had out there for years now.
No, they claim this was taken December 12th, 2019. This video is brand new.
Wow, because I'm looking at I'm looking at a video that was taken from what clearly is a Sony Handycam. As the night shot, big logo in the middle of the screen for some reason is still present in the video itself. I used to have one of these things, and this is a really old piece of gear, so I can't believe they wouldn't just use a webcam, which has better resolution.
This video's title is FWD Lift Experiment, December 12th, 2019.
Okay, I'm not looking at the right one then.
No, I don't think you are. I'll send you the link in the mine's page. 1 second. Here you go.
Yeah, please do. This is super interesting. This is stuff that I've been waiting for a long time, and I really hope this is promising. Let's see. Just waiting for, okay, yeah, I got the link. I'm clicking on it now. Let's take a quick overview. It's only 51 seconds long. So I'll go ahead and pause this for a second. I'm going to share my screen so everybody else at home can watch what I'm looking at here as soon as I figure out how to do that from my...
There's a button.
I think it's this button here.
Buckyballs.
That's got to be, yeah, okay, share. Cool, let's go ahead and watch this together. I'll turn the sound on, which isn't going to come through, but that's okay. I guess I'll maximize this.
It's going to burn up soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, your feature presentation is about to begin.
Jeremiah, I think everyone's seeing me. You should talk so it moves to you.
Oh, that's right. I forget that. I forget that this automatically captures the voice. Yeah.
D
Okay,
automatically.
Here we go. We're looking
Selected.
at a bar next to a ruler here, and instead of using a laser beam this time, they're physically moving a bar next to a measuring device, which is way better than a beam of light 30 feet across the room or something like that. That's significant. That is much better. That's a physical mass that's being moved in a way that wasn't previously being moved. And only 850 watts of power. That's pretty reasonable to prove the concept, especially considering how low their frequency is. This is one of those technologies that gets exponentially more effective with an increase in frequency. Because this is one of those space-time saturation things that depends solely on the speed of light as the saturation density of space versus how much energy they can put in. So any energy that is, I guess, outside of that scope of saturation is wasted, and they're taking a lot of power to do not a lot. But if they could increase the frequency, they could get quite a bit more force out of much less power. Of course, we don't have the tech for it right now at all as a species. Like we have trouble switching anything over a couple of gigahertz with reasonable amounts of power, unless you're talking like beam tubes. And that's obviously outside of the scope for most people.
What do you say about doing this at 9.5 gigahertz? You think that would...
If you have the ability to generate 9.5 gigahertz at a couple hundred watts, then hell yeah, I think that you'd get a very reasonable amount of force that would be measurable. They're not really talking about the frequency here in this video. I would love to know what they were running it as. I know these antennas are real small on the array. They're like, I think maybe an inch and a half total length or something like that. So I'm sure based on the appearance and whatnot, we could probably calculate roughly what waveband they're on. But I can guarantee you whatever it is, it needs to be higher.
Carbon's
Did you see where
interesting.
you're from?
We were just, oh yeah, where
Where
did
they're
we
based
see
out
where
of?
the time warp fellows are from?
They're space warp dynamics. They're from, I think, South or North Dakota. It's basically a college physics professor who's just like me, who's positive that anti-gravity is real. And yeah,
Jeremy, that's a proper number of tabs right there. That's the amount of tabs I can respect.
Yeah,
There's a lot of research. I mean, a lot of these are just data sheets and stuff. You know, it's like you got to look up so many friggin' MOSFETs and parts, and like I'm doing a schematic design right now, which is a little bit cumbersome. I'm just Jesus Christ, yeah, that's like.
I love Eagle. So is Eagle your preferred system? Oh, are you allowed to show us what's going on right now?
I can show you guys. I mean, it's just a schematic. So I'm just gonna go ahead and close out of these. I'll open up one, V 3 point, whatever again. Yeah, here we go. I'll just open this thing up. Let's see, 3B. Yeah, there we go. This is my newest one. This is the whole layout for the new one V3 driver. I'll just basically go over it. So we got a power boost converter that provides steady voltage to our driver chip. This is a full green power phase shifted H bridge that sends power to this anti-latching gate driver chip. And that chip has bootstrapping on it. So at only 8 volts of input from 2 LiPos or lithium ion batteries, I can ring the circuit up to 16 volts, and I can power these all N-channel MOSFETs floating on the positive rail because this will bootstrap, which means that basically it takes some positive voltage and it stacks it on top of itself and doubles it. It's not like a conventional boost converter. So on the board layout, it's just a sloppy mess right now. But I do have another version that it's all laid out, and I'll just go ahead and pull that up. And I think that's board B2.4 here. BRD. Looks like I changed them all. Yeah, that's roughly what it looked like. I mean, that was about how things were laid out on there. But I have this little board here for what it looks like, and I'll show you guys that. Just sitting over here.
So you're gonna print this? You're gonna do an acid water?
Oh yeah, I printed them. So this is just one of my other. Let me get back to my screen here so I can see what I'm showing you.
You do the home bath copper wash, or do you?
I was when I had a lab, but I'm not bringing acids into an apartment.
I saw a non-toxic way. I'm gonna send you a link to that you can do at home. I'll send you something.
Jesus, I can't even see my own thing. And yeah, I've tried the non-toxic method, and I just don't like it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I'm still screen sharing. That's what's going on here. Let me shut that off first off. I'm just kind of waiting for mines to respawn. I'm having major issues here. Okay, it should be stopping. And I should have video back soon.
Manufacturing a flexible printed circuit board without any
There we
chemical.
go. Okay. Yeah, this is the little board layout here. It's kind of a conglomerate. This is the one that I printed myself, and you can see that it's transparent. You can see kind of right through it, so there's no coating. When it's all put together, it ends up looking something like this. There are 2 heat sinks across each half bridge section for the full H bridge. There's this button on the top that you push, and then there's the output transformer, and there's a divider that runs along the side that gives me a live feedback measurement, and that's how the circuit regulates its phase shifter, PWM. So this board uses PWM. It starts at 100% duty cycle, 50% on each side, and then it switches back and forth. The other one runs all the time at 100% duty cycle, but it doesn't have the high side and the low side in phase. So all of the MOSFETs are on 100% of the time. The coil for the primary coil of the transformer is not necessarily getting voltage all the time. This means the MOSFETs aren't using their body diodes to waste energy. They're always in a conduction state, which is where they're most efficient. And this allows me to get 300 watts out of a little board that's, this big. It's a huge amount of power when you consider that a computer power supply, from maybe 15 years ago was this big box like that by like this deep, and that was 300 watts. And now I've got this tiny little board that fits in the palm of my hand that gives me that same amount of power, which is pretty freaking nuts. And the fact that I can just do this crap in an apartment is even crazier.
Right.
It could be
what is everybody else doing with their time, We should be having more of this.
Got it. Well, once they get paying you properly, you get you a Volterra. You seen the Volterra etcher and board printer? It prints solder.
Oh God, I would love one of those, man.
It slices, it dices, it picks, it pulls. It's exactly what every engineering aspiring.
All you need is one product to work, and you can get any investor who's got money.
I mean, it's like $1,000 or $2,000. It's not even that hard to get. Once you're making chips and you're selling things like that, it's worth it.
I think the Tesla coil is going to be that project too.
Yeah,
it's a simple thing. In fact, it's so blatantly simple that there's really no reason why it shouldn't be a kit. Right now, I have it more complicated.
I'll buy the signed version. Are you kidding me? I'll buy the signed version.
Signed version? What's that? Oh, a signed version of a coil?
Yeah, the autograph, bro.
I don't know where I'm going to fit an autograph on this coil.
You're going to have to etch it with your soldering gun, but it'll be okay. We'll get through it. I know you can do it.
So, this is the schematic for that Tesla coil. I don't know if this is going to come through or not, but this is the basic layout. So there's a lot of extra crap that's going on over here. Like all this is control. This is just
turn the paper forward a bit towards the screen, like 20 degrees toward.
You know what? Just take a screenshot in full res, and we can add like.
That's true. Send me a photo in full res later. But that's okay. I get
schematic, so I'll send you guys one when it's done. But yeah, basically this section right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only part that's necessary to make the coil work. All this crap is control that turns it on and off and helps regulate it, but it's not necessary for its function.
Nice.
So it's pretty straightforward as far as the tech goes. It's something that I don't think is above and beyond anybody's ability to do themselves without much trouble. And this is one of those rare circuits that when I built it and I realized I made one connection error, but I fixed it and it worked the first time, besides fixing that one error in my schematic. So it's simple enough to work the first time, and that's pretty significant. I've tried, over 25 or 26 MOSFETs, so far, attempting to make it work really, really well, and trying to get more power out of it because I have to see just how much I can push these FETs past their capabilities. Right now, I'm already running what I'm using from the Xboxes at 200% of their max, and that's something that you should never really do. But they do have a pretty high pulse rating, and they're taking it right now. They're rated for 40 amps pulse. I'm pushing them to like 50 amps pulse. They're rated for 30 volts. I'm pushing them to like 40 volts. They should be blowing up, but they're not most of the time until I really put a lot of load current on them, like when I try to arc off my face. And then, of course, I load the output of the secondary, and I pushed past 50 amps. I probably hit like 60 or 70, and I popped them. But that's to be expected. I did find some better MOSFETs now that I'm going to be including with the kit, and they are significantly better. Not only are they 4 times faster, which is a major part of the issue with these high-frequency coils, because that one I showed you guys is a 1.5 megahertz coil. And the other ones that I was testing on were 3.1 megahertz and 2.8 megahertz respectively. And so at these kinds of high frequencies, MOSFETs don't really like to work because, like Mark said, they are analogous to relays, and in the same sense that a MOSFET works kind of like a relay with very low on resistance, it also is generally not that fast. So to try to make them work fast, you've got to use a couple of engineering tricks. And one of those is there's this thing in a MOSFET called Miller capacitance. And this is like a virtual capacitor between the internal leads and the PN junction. So when power is on the drain tab of the MOSFET, that's like, you know, one of the sides of the contactor for the relay, and it flows through that contactor on the relay, or it flows through that PN junction. Some amount of energy is fed back to the gate that is used to turn the device on. And so in this case, for high frequency operation, we utilize this normally parasitic effect to actually turn the MOSFETs on and turn them off again. So, but I found better MOSFETs that will solve all these problems, and I should be able to get even more output from the coil. I'm hoping for at least a 30% increase in power and a 50% decrease in heat.
I had the same problem when I was using MOSFETs to control the high voltage input for the triode vacuum tubes to control within 100,000 volts. And what I did was I put different types of resistors across the feed lines to the MOSFET, and that increased the speed of the MOSFET incredibly, like triple or quadruple the speed, just by adding a couple resistors into the circuit. Although you have to feed those resistors when you're turning it on all the time, you know, there's always a give and take between the two of speed and how much power it actually takes to run the thing. But we're talking microamps, very milliamps at most. You know, we're not talking about a lot of power.
Yeah, the cool thing about a MOSFET, unlike a transistor, is that a MOSFET is like a capacitor that's also a switch. When you turn it on, it stays on. It doesn't require coil power like a relay or like a transistor that you have to continuously feed current into. It just
why
stays on.
does it work that way?
It works that way because there's inside of a MOSFET on the PN junction, there's a atomic level exchange of electrons that takes place, and two physical materials have an interface which is normally insulating, and when we send electrons across one direction of that material, they grab onto other electrons and allow them to move in unison. And if you look on an electron microscope scan of a MOSFET, you'll see what looks very much like a water valve, and it works the same way for electrons flowing through the PN junction. They make their way through. When the gate gets power, it opens up the valve and electrons can freely flow. And this is one of the reasons why a MOSFET turns on and it has 0.003 ohms of resistance in some cases or less. It acts just like a wire. It's effectively a direct replacement for a wire of the same size, which is incredible. And that's only because it has a physical part inside which makes a mechanical motion and an electrical bias, allowing energy to flow. A transistor is a little different. It doesn't operate so much like a crank valve or something. It operates more like a spring-loaded trigger. It only works while you're pulling on it, so you have to continuously provide it with power to keep it on. Otherwise, it'll naturally shut itself off.
So something also in
MOSFET logic.
something that's kind of interesting about your ideas coming from, like, I mean, some of these are inspired, literally, you're saying, because you had a vision when you asked the universe, you put out there, hey, Nikola Tesla, help me out.
Field.
It could be also that, like, somebody just answered that and wasn't Nikola Tesla, but at least they sent you some information or something, like, because it sounds like you felt like inspired. Do you feel pretty strongly like that was beyond just a coincidence, like that information came to you? It wasn't just that you thought of it yourself after saying that? Like, that's
the funny thing about it. That's the really funny thing about it, is that I can't actually tell you. I can tell you that from the investigation and the meditation, that a real, tangible, physical device came out of it that looks nothing like a Tesla coil that I've seen any time in the last 100 years. And that it does things that Tesla coils do, which I've been a Tesla coil builder since I was a little kid, and I've never made one even close to what this one does. So I can tell you that it's something really unique, that it's not like anything else that I built. And I would imagine that if the information was already clear in my head, if I was aware of it in any kind of sense, I would have probably already made one of these things. But the fact that it came out only days after this stuff popped into my head, and that the construction process wasn't so much a figuring things out, it was very much like an assembly. I already knew what I was doing. And this is one of the reasons I think that it worked so well.
So before that moment, did you believe that there was any like?
I asked. I said, "Is this Tesla?" And I got an answer which wasn't yes. Or I should say, it didn't sound like yes in my head. It sounded more like, "Of course, here's information," or more like, "You'll know because of the information."
It was the open sesame. So
right. The words, like the voice in my head, was some crude approximation of what I imagine Tesla's accent to sound like. I don't actually know what his voice sounded like. I know he had a very strong accent. So that's the voice that I heard in my head that was tied with the information. But ultimately, thinking of it, it was imagery. It was pictures. It was diagrams. It was
stuff that you could jot down, and then you could transform that into an actual device.
Right. So I can't tell you beyond any reasonable doubt at all that it wasn't already in my head, or that I hadn't picked it up from something else, or it wasn't floating around in my subconscious, because that's a totally viable possibility, and I have to consider that realistically.
It's interesting that you consider those kinds of possibilities. It just makes me wonder, though, like, because it sounds like you've tried everything, so you're willing to try one more thing, which was just asking the universe, like, hey, why not?
In this case, it's not so important to me whether or not I actually contacted Tesla. What is important is that I got out of it what I wanted to get out of it, and it worked.
But do you think that then, if it is plausible that somehow this information was somehow inspired, what does that say about the plausibility of there being, like right now we're in the building that Houdini was in, right? And he used to do, before he died, lots of these shows where he'd break mediums.
Well, I mean, like, the interesting thing is Nikola Tesla himself contacted the medium Edgar Cayce under several sessions for technical advice and information about technologies he was working on. He would ask Cayce very in-depth technical questions. From what I understand, that he would then answer with knowledge that there was no way this guy could have possibly known, at least as far as we can estimate. I mean, Tesla was pretty much a pioneer in his day and age, and for him to be getting new information that wasn't already known by him or in his circles, I think says something to the relevancy of whether or not there is any merit to this study. So if Tesla himself believed in it, then maybe there is something more to it, because I trust that guy's life experience over my 33 years so far on Earth. But then again, this is all hearsay, and I haven't personally heard it from Tesla himself, and I don't really know anything about Edgar Cayce other than the guy was supposedly a very, very powerful psychic who went through a trance-like state, and almost like he was sleeping, and he could deliver information that was way above and beyond what we would consider to be in the esoteric genre. These weren't like washy fields. These were like, okay, you connect A to B and you get C.
So you think it's at least somewhat plausible?
I think it's plausible enough to try. And hey, even if we look at this like a psychological tool, if we don't consider this as contacting anybody in the Akashic records, but we just say this is another form of psychology which we don't understand yet, is it useful?
At very least,
absolutely. It's obviously
if you're contacting the Akashic records here, then what's happening is you're contacting somebody who's done this on Earth before, because the Akashic records is connected to the planet, which means that this technology has been here before. How were the pyramids built? Where did the Sphinx come from? Exactly. Trying to make a lot more sense.
So this is some of the weird thing. We were just listening to this guy talking the other day, and we were thinking a lot about this. Okay, so hear me out, because it goes pretty deep. But if we're talking about cosmic entities and like echo coincidence control between individuals, maybe it's something that Tesla interfered with and you interfered with that's connecting both of you, and it's an intelligence. So it's something that can exist in energy and exist in multiple states. It can fold, and it might also exist in different times, in which case it could find you and it could find different moments that you're existing simultaneously. Which
here's what Tesla thought about it. And is I can just read the quote, but I think I'll just summarize it because it's probably easier to find. He basically said that he is nothing but an antenna, a connection to the universe, and he's connecting to a giant intelligence which has all knowledge of everything. And he's only receiving a tiny little piece of it. He's only pierced into the veil a small amount, he says. But he's in it at that time. He was looking into it more, and he believed that all of his knowledge came from some external source that was out there somewhere that wasn't himself.
That's what Tesla said.
Definitely not Eric Dubé. I mean, wink. Eric Dubé is asking you, do you have a YouTube channel? What is your YouTube channel?
I do, and unfortunately, Eric, it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about at all. It's just me building projects with my friends and showing them off, but it's Join the Technicians on YouTube. Join the Technicians, yeah.
Legit. And then definitely not Eric Dubé. Are you just Eric Dubé? Okay.
He's just dissing today.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm thinking this more and more as a thought. Then is we have consciousness that is sort of a spirit or a kind of a remote viewing force that's existing in multiple bodies. If you're going from one body to another body, you're going through energy or through light. If that's able to exist in simultaneously different space-time dimensions, then it would link you to other persons that have experienced contact with it. So you would have memories, perhaps, from the other persons that it's experienced by.
I have a lot of memories that didn't come from this lifetime, and I've always kind of considered that to be a form of delusion of some sort. But
that's the best way to get away with it. You're just like, whatever. I must just have to. I'm purely psychosomatic, and I have to deal with it. But other times, you're finding that it's helping you invent new technology, like this held thing. This is 2020 almost, and you're holding in your hand the beginnings of what 2020 is supposed to look like. Really,
Who's the author of Dissinformation Darkly? He wrote a book about this.
Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick. He had the exegesis thing.
I love those stories.
I was about to say, what do you think of Philip K. Dick? Like,
I've read a lot of his stories. I love the dystopian post-apocalyptic perspective. I like the variations and the explored topics. I think he had some pretty frighteningly accurate predictions about where things might go, and it's in the same vein of George Orwell and others who have very accurately predicted the dystopian nature of modern society at its worst.
Have you read Valis?
No,
yeah, Valis is one I couldn't remember.
Valis is the one I would recommend. Ben?
You explain it.
No,
exactly what you're talking about.
Well, Valis is just, from my perspective of Valis, it's a little like I feel bad for the Hunter S. Thompson kind of like alien life form that's being used to experience tryptamine by all of these people that are just driving around in a van, like using this alien for their own like experiences, basically. Yeah. But at the same time, that explains a lot about why, maybe after let's say you get contacted by something when you're like 30, because and then it goes back and it finds you when you were 13. That's kind of, if something's able to be in different moments and those moments are simultaneous, because this thing it's actually existing in those moments. Once it finds you, it doesn't matter because it could go back and check you out at different moments outside of time.
Have you watched Gaia and Cosmic Disclosure? They actually multi-dimensional beings that are capable of doing that type of stuff, and their evolution happened here on Earth. Part of their evolution, and they are connected to us on a certain level, and they can't move into their next dimension until we have some sort of upgrade of our consciousness. So they're trying to raise our consciousness as a result. So we have this symbiotic relationship with higher beings trying to bring us up to a higher level of consciousness. One of those things is disclosure. And if you listen to what's his name? Not Corey Good, the other guy on Gaia.
David Wilcock.
David Wilcock's latest video where he's up in the Sierra Nevada talking about 2020 is the year it has to happen. And I agree with him. 2020 is the year it's going to happen.
Well, there's some interesting things going on with this conjunction thing. And I also find it interesting that it's everybody talking about this. This doesn't have any concern with aliens, like you just said, technically, because it could just be interdimensional. They're here. They're part of Earth's history. So really, it fits into all of it, from the volcanology, the L. Ron Hubbard things. Different religions around the planet have talked about beings that are outside of time. And we talked last time
Stanley
a bit about
Kubrick in 2001: Space Odyssey,
the black monolith, and Billy Meier. Of course, like what do you want to go back into maybe a little bit about what does it all mean, you think, in terms of consciousness and humans interacting with consciousness? And do you think there's any credence to any of that? Any of the cosmic disclosure stuff? Does that sound like some of that stuff has any bearing on reality?
I think there's a possibility that it does. There's two possibilities. Either the guy's telling the truth, or we're or he's the greatest con man of all time. And I'm a very
Well,
gullible.
also he's
I mean, that's
slightly. He
betraying
could
if he
also be.
was
There's always the third option that he doesn't
half and
completely
half.
know what's going on. You know, he might believe what's going on because that's what
I
he
mean, he's claiming to have had these certain experiences. So it's either he had them, he's delusional that he thinks they had them, or he didn't have them. Those are the three options. So whether or not he heard correct things about the how and the why, he definitely claims he's seen this stuff, seen this technology, knows what we're doing with it. Most of the stuff on Cosmic Disclosure is not talking about how anything works, but about what they're actually doing with it. They're going to XYZ planet, and they did a, X, Y, and Z. One interesting thing that Corey Good said that is verifiable was in season 10, episode 2. He talks about meeting the Galactic Federation in a spaceship near Saturn. That's season 10, episode 2. And basically all 23 some odd alien races that are in charge of these different genetic tests on Earth that are abducting people and animals and all that stuff were all in the room when these blue chicken people showed up and claimed that they have to stop all these experiments because the Sphere Being Alliance, yada yada yada.
Yeah, more with blue avian
What
stuff.
really
I don't really know if I want to buy into any of that. I guess it could be true.
But here's the point: if abductions and animal mutilation stopped within the last year or two, that's a verifiable way of knowing.
You're right, Mark.
the
Yes,
truth.
you're right. That would be really interesting to find the numbers on that. If that's something that I would imagine somebody like MUFON, which has, as far as I know, the biggest database of anybody, would probably be compiling that information right now.
Yeah, you don't want to explain to people who don't know much about MUFON and the infiltration.
Yeah, they got totally.
Even I don't know much about MUFON other than who they are publicly. I don't spend a whole lot of time looking into stuff, but
I asked them about anti-gravity, in terms of disclosure, and the guy was very coy about it. He didn't want to answer my question. I actually got it on video, and I asked him point blank, why don't you support anti-gravity? Because I wanted to be at MUFON when I was here in New Jersey. And when I asked them for a table and explained what I was going to do, the guy didn't get back to me. And I later found out that within an hour of him receiving my email, he quit MUFON.
Well, that's really crappy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 501c3, so they're supposed to be all public.
And he told me that it had nothing to do with me. It had something to do with somebody posted some anti-Semitic posts that MUFON supported. Therefore, he didn't want to be involved with it. It sounded like some bullshit reason. To be honest,
you're from Israel. How do they even have the gall to do this? Okay, look, all right, wait, but I'm sorry, but no, okay. So you
totally got taken over.
Yeah,
5 years ago, we saw it.
Yeah, Ben.
Email. Email right now. You want to see it?
What?
The email to MUFON.
Hell yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is proof.
But okay, Ben, just give them a little backstory because I haven't been paying as much attention. I should notice.
Special warfare or psychological warfare. They run a lot of this stuff. They run a lot of Disinfo sites. They run above top secret, guy-like productions, all that shit. And now I say they own MUFON, like they own it. There's like a for-profit company that's linked to them, puts on all their.
Are we talking about DeLong?
Okay, are you guys ready? Here, check this out. MUFON 2018 Symposium. Hi, Marquetta. My name is Mark Sokhal. I basically sent them an email asking to be on the panel. They said that no, you can't be on the panel because of everyone's confirmed. So then I asked them, how about I can set up a table, and they sent me to a different email address who I then contacted. And basically it went nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, like they're very specific about their little club, and this is kind of the thing.
It's an in-group thing now.
It's an in-group thing.
It's a control,
and
control your perception of reality and yourself.
It's really funny because they
away from your friends.
A lot of the people that I think are doing that stuff, they're starting to realize that their club is too small and they're not getting enough audience member anymore because not a lot of people are buying the new narrative. And so much of what the MUFON comes out of was that show Roswell. It was like the Degrassi.
They showed in Taken 2 where
Dawson's Creek, right? Is it? And that it was all about kids who are their bodies are possessed. They go through this anamorph like thing, and they meet at like UFO conventions, and then their bodies get stolen from them for a while, and they wake up again, and it's like, this is the '90s like TV series that everyone loved to watch. Really, Roswell was a really popular show. Yeah, it was free. It was on TV, like airwave TV. You didn't need cable to see it. So everyone was watching shows about UFO abductions. But what are the abductions they're talking about in that show? They're not talking about just cow abduction. They're like, we're putting souls in your body. You know, that's the thing that it always comes back to is the soul, the light, the touching, and the consciousness.
Here, check this out now. Okay, so I was contacted by Chris Cogswell, who's the director of research.
Cogs from Jetsons. Okay.
And here, check this out. Thanks for reaching out. Could you please send over a resume and some papers, information on the work in the subject so we can better assess your request? I responded, hey, Chris, thanks for reaching out. Is MUFON dedicated to disclosure? I think the best way to make disclosure happen would be by breakthroughs in field propulsion technology, and that is a discussion I would like to participate in. Please advise. Sent him back that email. Look what I got. Mailed it. System problem.
This is correct. That answers your question.
Bad timing, Mark. Just bad timing.
John Ventura after racist rant from a year ago. So basically, he went looking back and found some racist rant from John Ventura and decided to quit MUFON within an hour.
Jesse Ventura, you mean? Jesse Ventura or John Ventura? I'm sorry.
John Ventre. I was reading Ventura.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so there's all of these organizations. I've done a little bit of information about like Unarius, which was the Disney associated UFO cult in California. I mean, they're everywhere, but they're really big because in the 60s and the 50s, they would be sending the governors UFO information, and they were saying the year 2000 was going to be the beginning of the landing of 53 UFOs, and that they were going to start
in 2000.
Yeah,
one year later.
And there was a lot of weird disclosure. What we learned a lot about in 2000
TV,
was TV was showing you what's not real.
Fiction.
They were trying to show you that a lot of things were not real about our misinterpretations that we have about aliens. And
Newsweek.
Also that there is, I mean, the thing is, by trying to teach people that there is no aliens, I also wonder if that's not a total recall thing. Because if people are some of the people that are so obsessed with the idea, like, no, doesn't exist. No, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't that exactly what MKUltra you would do? You'd just be like, I can't handle it. It's not there. There is nothing out there. Nothing. Like, but it'd be one thing if you said everything I've seen is manipulated and it's augmented.
I feel like that's the same perspective a lot of scientists have as well. Those who claim to be scientific but are in fact very much dogmatic in their studies.
Yeah, I will admit I think about 60% of scientists are autists and the other 40 are liars. You know what I mean? A lot of scientists.
I have no idea where real numbers lie. I can tell you the scientific community is not science. I hate this too because this happens all the time, and I have to constantly defend science to people who come from religious backgrounds and do not understand that there is a difference between science and dogma. And the reason is because they think science is scientists. They're not. Sorry, but your consensus group, including members like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku, do not represent the entirety of all scientific knowledge to the human race, and you can't just watch TV and figure out how far we've gone. So unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. But it's hard to convince people who have that kind of perspective that there's any validity to real measurable results, repeatable experiments, and things like that. Instead, they'll dismiss all that, saying science is just like religion, and even though you've proven that the Earth is round again and again, it's still flat, and you're just all lying, and God is the real answer, and this, that, and other. I've heard it all. I've heard every dogmatic explanation, and the trouble is that it's not coming from people out of the church. It's coming from people within the scientific community as well, saying the exact opposite thing with exactly as little evidence to support their claims. And I don't care what your belief system is, but for God's sake, have some evidence for it. And whatever that is, if you've got that evidence, I'll pay attention to you and I'll believe wherever that evidence takes us. But I'm not going to listen to, all science is flawed, therefore whatever evidence you think you have is automatically invalid because I don't understand how it works.
It's away from any opportunity to learn anything or try to like even give any credence to your existential experience if you can't even bother to mix and match with other people perspectives to see which part of it's augmented and real. I mean, we need that
They
amount.
say one of the signs of intelligence is being able to hold two simultaneously contradicting ideas in your head at the same time and consider them both with equal legitimacy. And that's something that not a lot of people really want to engage in. But it is dissonance is uncomfortable for humans. When we have an idea that contradicts another idea, it makes us uncomfortable and nervous, and we get anxiety and we get other body issues that are physiologically present as a result of our psychology. And so, yeah, a lot of people don't like to spend very much time in that state of dissonance because it does challenge the ego. It makes you wonder, what is real? What is not? If I don't have a solid world to believe in, if I can't trust my eyes and my ears and my senses, how can I trust anything? And that updoes my world and makes everything unstable, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. That's science. The truth is we don't really know. And our senses do really lie to us just like that. And we are as confused as it seems like we are. And we are still looking for answers as much as we always have been. So it's a harsh truth to admit, but when you accept it and you can be like, okay, I'm fine with not knowing. And I'm fine with being wrong and being proven wrong again and again. And I'm fine with failing every single day, multiple times a day until I get it right. That's the mind of a scientist that you've got to have if you want to push through this stuff, because you're going to be wrong all the time and you're going to fail all the time and it's going to make you uncomfortable all the time. And every single day is going to be like that. And eventually you get used to it, and that's your new way. And now
discovery is paved with failure.
Absolutely. So much failure. Oh God, so much failure.
Speaking of failure,
works.
Contradictory ideas. What's your take on the Michelson-Morley experiment, especially the further ones he did after the initial one failed? He went on Mount Wilson.
I don't remember all the details of the experiment. I'd love to, but when I read it several years ago, I thought that it was conducted much better in the later versions. And as far as I remember, he did prove the existence of the ether and realized
and they completely disregarded it and tried to.
Well, yeah, because by that time his name had already been tarnished. He did an experiment that didn't work, and he was so confident that it was going to work and bragged about it so much that when it finally didn't, it's like, well, gig is up. This guy's an idiot. If he can believe in himself that much, then clearly he is prone to make the same kind of mistake twice. The truth is, I don't actually know if they really believed in their experiment that much.
I'm trying to find everything on it, but we have a member in the Discord that has a bunch of rare books and stuff linked to this.
I heard about the Michelson-Morley experiment, that there was two versions of it. The original one used the light
in a basement
back and forth to detect any movement of Earth. And one of the later versions, which was not done by Michelson-Morley, was done just recently, was a one-way version of light where you're detecting it going from point A to point B, not returning. And the theory is that if the light comes back and forth, they would basically add to zero. So
exactly, because if it's faster in one direction than the other, the end is going to be zero.
Direction. So if you got just a one-way direction of light, you'll be able to see if there is any luminous effort after that.
Super interesting.
Light, and you'd see a slowdown in one direction and a speed up in another. And that's exactly what they found.
They had a positive result?
They had a positive. Yeah, we're moving in the direction of the constellation Leo at like some crazy speed.
We're in like 2019, and this has been taboo for over 100 years. That's good. I'm going to have to look that up.
Illuminati, concave Earth.
Also, I mean, the Sagnac
Stuff Beagle, Terrence Howard's New Free Energy. Have you researched Terrence Howard's New Free Energy?
I have not heard of any new energy by Terrence Howard. I wonder if this is the same guy that did the Starburst machine.
I remember when, YouTube was overflowing with everyone making magnet motors, and there's never a single design.
What the heck, right?
You remember that?
For years.
It's like 2009
7 to 10, sometime in there. It was
all over.
Yeah, there was like everyone was making these free energy motors, and then they just kind of disappeared. And
remember Pestwiki? Sterling Allen, the child predator. And like the
whole I'm looking here for the newest stuff by Terrence Howard and this energy machine, but I'm not really finding it amongst Google's extreme filters here. So I would love a link to anything that you have so I can look into this farther and actually give you an opinion on it at some point.
Yes, please, Stuffed Beagle. Anything you can send, and if the link doesn't let you send for some
So
reason,
I'm not
just
looking for a marketable thing, stuff, Beagle. I'm just looking for any link or research that you found, because obviously you've heard about this from somewhere. So whatever you read that you're interested in, I would like to also see that same material.
Yeah.
How about them Chinaman hybrid human monkeys? What do you guys think about that? Huh?
Not at all.
All right, I'm gonna send you a link to this because it's real.
I gotta see.
World's first human monkey hybrid created in China. Let me give you a better article.
Is this actually a real story?
In BBC, I saw one about it. Independent, Sun. Where's
Independent Code UK's
they're acceptable.
fairly, yeah.
But where's BBC?
Oh yeah, Brittany S. Was it good?
Did she eat the monkey? Oh no!
She just watched finished the last Jedi and released it. I don't know. I've been watching the Star Wars stuff. I happen to like Star Wars. It's very motivating as a technologist.
Oh, you did? You saw the new Star Wars?
I haven't seen it yet. I've been wanting to see it.
Oh yeah, I have not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
Okay, well if she says it's good, then I'll watch it.
I mean, I've heard that it's acceptable from a lot of people.
I know some. It was. I heard it was very polarizing. Some people absolutely either loved it or hated it, or they loved parts of it and they hated parts of it. But there wasn't really a whole lot of like, it was just it's okay. It was, like, it was great, but kind of not at all like that new Ghostbusters movie, which I think was universally received poorly.
Ghostbusters remake?
Not the.
It's not that new. It's a couple years old. But
yeah. There's a new Ghostbusters they're making with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd in it, and it's supposed.
Oh no way! I didn't hear about that. That I will actually see.
Yeah, well, Dan Aykroyd's really interested in the paranormal for like historical reasons too. His family were part of the Fox sisters in New England here. There were mediums that would come around, and even in this building, apparently, like they did like shows, and then eventually died in utter poverty and like tried to convince everyone to leave them alone, and they weren't really like mediums, but they've been saying they were mediums since they were like little girls. And a lot of people in New England believe in spiritualism. Like that was a huge thing in the 19th century here, which led to people working on cathode ray tube and radio television for actually medium purposes, like trying to pick up spirits using those devices, using vacuums.
Yeah.
But Dan Aykroyd, his family were actual Ghostbusters. That was like the family business, and you got to imagine how weird that is. But like literally, like you go in and try to convince people that they can go back into a building that people died in, because a lot of people die places, Exactly. And part of it might have actually been, like just psychosomatic. You convince people that everything's okay. I know, I like priests who'd throw holy water on corners.
You had a poltergeist in my house when I grew up?
No, wait, what? Hold on.
Crazy.
You had a poltergeist in your house?
From what I could tell, a real poltergeist, but it only happened on like one day, and I had my best friend over, and we were alone in the house, and like we couldn't sleep for 4 hours because stuff was moving.
What? Stuff was
it only
moving?
happened one time in my life, and I became like a.
What was moving?
A door. A door was slamming and opening like all night.
Oh my god!
We have plenty of I would imagine that we have plenty of ghost stories to go around amongst this group of peers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't consider myself like one to really believe in ghosts, but I've definitely lived in like pretty much everywhere I've ever lived is like haunted by everyone else's standards.
I don't know.
We got that interview, by the way, Beagle. It looks like it's only a 1 hour and 33 something minute interview. So basically, what you're talking about at this 1 hour and 33 minute mark should be like in the last 40 seconds or so. If that's correct, then I will certainly watch that because I've got the video up and I believe it's the correct one and it has the same title as you posted. So I will take a look into this. I have no idea who this guy is, never heard of Terrence Howard, but I will be very interested at the end of this broadcast to watch this and see what he has to say about free energy.
Yes, the TV was supposed to be the first spirit box Twilight missed. That was the one of the names for it. Before they started using it to broadcast to each other, it was just supposed to pick up interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that movie, The Arrival, with
oh god, that was pretty deep.
Charlie Sheen?
Was it Charlie Sheen?
Yeah, I think I have.
Oh,
he's working for like SETI, and he picks up a alien signal, he thinks, because it's a non-Earth bound signal. But all of a sudden, when he looks at it,
This isn't Arrival from 16. It's a different one.
That's a different one. 1996.
1996.
Yeah, and he picks up the signal and instantaneously, like horns start playing Mexican mariachi music over the signal, so you cannot hear the underlying signal. And then he finds out that there's some sort of an invasion going on that's leading towards global warming by these,
they were considering that stuff in their
very They Live movie, but they're hiding the signal in radio waves, and you can't even hear them because they're just so loud. And that's why they make horn music and electronic music and all of these pop songs, is to kind of obscure the signal that was going out.
Outer Limits had an episode about almost the same thing in the 90s. I don't remember which one, but
Auntie says took the tubes. I think they're talking about the cathode ray tubes. How about more Billy Meier stuff? Do you have any thoughts on Billy Meier?
Nothing new that I don't think I've expressed before, but again, I'm not an expert on Billy. I believe a lot of Billy's stuff. I don't believe all of it across the board, because there has been a lot of claimably mixed misinformation that has been released as official material, which had nothing to do with Billy himself. So I don't know what was his and what was misinformation, but I think that there is quite a bit to look into, at least.
Are we talking Meier?
What about...
Meier never has given us any usable piece of engineerable technology or talked in depth about any of it. The only thing he did say is that he was instructed to share the existence of the people that he was in contact with and talk about the problems that we have on this planet and try to help the species, but was told not to talk about the technology or bring it to mankind yet, because I guess we're too prone to blow ourselves up with it or something like that.
Right.
Which sounds like the common story always used as an excuse for why somebody can't release information.
Which is weird, because it's like...
It's usually an excuse to control
That's
us.
actually true in a way. But at the same time, I mean, can this go on forever, where we have these full disclosures?
Gradual disclosure. Well, do you think that there's a reason why something would interfere with us before we're developed, and why they wouldn't? Is the Star Trek protocol make sense, or what's going on? Why would they be interacting or not?
Well, I mean, historically, if they wouldn't be wrong, what was the first thing that we did when we figured out how to split an atom?
Use it for bombs instead.
Right. What's the first thing that we usually do when we figure out a tremendous new energy source?
Conquest.
Yeah. So I can't blame somebody watching to say that's an illegitimate reason, or that they might be speculating a bit too far, because as a species, that's exactly what we do, and that's exactly what we should expect ourselves to do in the future.
I mean, you look at, like, the Georgia Guidestones and stuff. Like, what do they actually want the outcome to be? They want, like, smaller population, but they want people to be less.
Well, a lot.
Interesting thing. This is a book by Gene Andrade. It's basically on the Billy Meier story, Star Wisdom, Principles of Pleiadian Spirituality. Doesn't get very much into the technology part, but they're very into the spirituality end of things. And they talk about their planet era, which is around Tegeta and the Pleiades, and how they have only a population of 500 million, and there's a certain panel that's in charge about which parents are able to bring kids in, because they have to keep the population at a certain
they have
level.
life extension. They can live forever, pretty much.
He explains away gay and sexual orientation and mental problems that our people are having, and due to overpopulation, because it says there's a limited number of souls in the gravity well that is Earth.
It seems that this guy has forgotten to read history, because that has been a pretty common thing since Greece and Rome. That's well reported that, like, homosexuality has sort of been a part of any civilized culture throughout history, and it's been a big part too. So, and it seems that the more civilized the culture, as in the less people have to work, the more free time they have to spend at home and think about things, the more they have to explore.
We're not talking about homosexuality on the level of just doing it. We're talking about institutionalizing it, and
that way.
People that
China is about to legalize homosexual marriage. The one thing China's going to legalize is homosexual marriage.
They
I mean,
also
like
lifted the
2020,
one-child
ladies and
policy
gentlemen.
too, though.
Well, seeing as China does have, birth rate regulation, I guess it really makes a lot of sense.
They got rid of that.
They lifted
At
the
least-
one-child policy. You can pay to have
Yeah.
extra kids now. You have the right to pay.
They want to colonize like the moon and stuff. And
Yeah.
Mars, so they want 2 billion Chinese.
But it made sense at first because we had so many men.
Grow them. And
No.
apparently they've had one sprout. They had a seed sprout or something like that. It didn't survive very long with, no light on the dark side of the moon where they landed the damn thing, but it did apparently sprout. So that's significant. That's something.
So it seems like the narrative, though, that they like to tell you is that we have to change to become better people, and that those in outer space that know about us, they want to help us so desperately. They're waiting for us, and then they're going to be nice to us and reward us, and like, so what's in it for them? Like what's really what's real about that? Like, who expects aliens, quote unquote, to be so peaceful and so
Don't expect them to be peaceful.
Yeah.
Expect them to be like us. But there always is going to be, that advanced race that has a non-altruistic reason to be nice to us, such as those beings that are somehow connected to us karmitically, that need us to rise to a certain level of evolution for them to move on evolution-wise. So, there are these connections that we don't understand yet that would cause certain
But this week,
races to be.
One of the connections that I've heard that we are supposed to
Extraterrestrial races, if they were warlike, they wouldn't exist for very long. In order to exist 50,000 years, in the cosmos, you need to be peaceful. Because if you're warlike, you're eventually going to meet a group that's more powerful than yourself, and you'll be wiped out.
Yeah, until we can solve problems with our wit instead of our force, we haven't really moved on.
Well, even if you're peaceful and then you meet a super powerful warrior people, though, I mean, isn't that the Klingon deal?
That too.
You got to stay a little hardcore if you want to, keep the peace.
Right, but that's assuming that there's many other also got to stay hardcore warring civilizations out there that travel the stars. And
even if there's just
I think there's a fundamental disagreement between the concept of being a warring species that's filled with conflict and the sheer amount of unison and cooperation that you have to have as a society, as a species, in order to build something that can get out into space and travel amongst the stars. My brain can't rationalize how you could be both warlike and have enough continuity of society and sharing freely of ideas and acceptance to develop technologies like this. It just doesn't really seem to, they don't really seem to go together. Now, obviously, you can take technologies that already exist and adapt those to whatever you want, and this can be all done via black budgets and projects, but as far as like bringing it to everybody for the species, I'm pretty sure it'll happen naturally when we're ready to communicate freely, when the scientific dogmas start to piddle away, sort of like they are doing already. Like a lot of these dogmas that used to be considered intangible and completely non-contested are all overturned now. I mean, this is back, I'm sure Isaac Newton would have argued till he was blue in the face with Einstein about how wrong the guy was, because there was just no way he could have possibly only had a tiny little piece of equation. It made sense to him. But of course, as we move on, we realize things that we didn't know, and I think that it changes what we think we need to do to survive. Maybe we'll realize as technology gets better and as we become more civilized that it's not necessary to use force anymore, that was an old method and it's not even as effective as the ones we have now. But until war stops being the most effective method for conquest, then we're going to continue doing it.
According to Gaia, there's a race of reptilians that's very far advanced technologically and is warlike, and they just have complete dominance over their area of space. And similar to
the Draconians from the Pleiades, you mean?
They have treaties with other races, and they slowly take over worlds one at a time, and they've apparently been trying to take over our world and are connected to the monetary system.
Have you seen Jupiter Ascending? Because that's the whole plot. Except in that one, it's just the reptilians are subservient. So
yeah, they're working for someone too. It's actually cephalopods.
That's the people who made the Matrix movies.
Tech Command cephalopods above the Dracos. But if
I don't know. About
Gaia
that.
gets a lot. Gaia is just
this,
made for TV version of 1890s, spiritualism. So you look at Maria Orsic, and the Thule and the Vril and the Hyperborean, and
I don't
they're
know what to
always
make of
talking
it, but,
about the Pleiades having been through a major disaster that the Draconians are responsible for.
Cosmic wars.
There was
I
a
mean,
cosmic war,
like-
and then their 12 or 13 zodiacs represent a treaty alliance, and they're all reaching towards the center
19
point, which is Earth.
I don't know if you've seen
And
this.
and it's a race, but maybe if one gets here 100 years earlier, then they're a little luckier. But they can't.
Any theory that has Earth as the center of everything, because
Uh-huh.
every time we thought that the Earth was the center of it all, it turned out to be wrong. And that's usually based on some innate need that we want to feel important, when in reality we're just a little
Right.
bit we're just smart monkeys on a space rock.
Well, it was more not that they were the center of everything, but that we were the center of 13 particular places had access to get to us about the same amount of time from where they were, and we were a benefit to like colonize or mine, and so that they're allowed to work around us, but they don't work together because they have a treaty that they would blow up each other.
They've been at war for did they say 200,000 years? Or
Yeah,
something?
something like that. So like, you stay out of our part of space. This is our side of the Milky Way
It's
tracks
really
or whatever.
weird.
But Earth itself, they're like, all right, well, all bets are off on that one because that
Yeah.
rocks. And so they're all they're all kind of allowing the other to do what they're doing so they can do their own thing or something like that. That was that's the Gaia kind of, as far as I can tell, what they're kind of suggesting is happening.
Mark, so what were they saying on Gaia about the reptilian thing? Because
So reptilians apparently have the technology to basically live forever. They can transfer soul from one body to another, and they're run by a queen. The men are made to look extremely attractive and die young. So it's a woman-controlled society, and they have very, very advanced technology, and they're working with another group of beings that know how to hollow out asteroids and turn them into
like Phobos.
Or they're a very weaponized race, but they lack something that we have, which is the ability to move on to the next dimension. So they're as advanced technologically as they possibly can be in this dimension,
But they're
without
still
moving on spiritually. They're lacking that spiritual knack that we have, and that's something that they hope to gain from us through interbreeding.
Have you ever seen a guy named Alex Collier? He's in 1994 he was talking about this before David Icke, and he's been in Japan and stuff.
Do you send that?
Yeah,
I'll type Alex Collier. Yeah, send that into mine.
Just do Alex Collier 1994. He's like physically very upset about the whole
To Janska.
I think it might be in Czech or something. I'm not sure.
All right, that's something.
It's English. Interview's English.
What else was there? There's a message a second ago you just said. Oh, yeah, the comment, Hunatic asked, how credible do you think Bob Lazar is?
This question again.
Yeah, so basically, I think Bob Lazar saw real stuff, real technology at S4, and he's telling the truth, but what they told him about the explanation on how it works was bullshit. It was misinformation. So don't hope to replicate his Element 115 power generator anti-gravity device. That's just a dead end that was put into his mind, with the thought that he would probably squeal.
Need to know information is really, and when you get into augmented total recall because of hypnosis, imagine that you are a kid that's being tortured, given drugs, electrocuted, and they do the MKUltra kind of thing to you and tell you, that if you see this person's face or these glasses or this hat, that you are to only see a giant lizard or a giant cockroach or something, a giant lobster. And you can actually, with hypnosis, make it so someone sees not the person themselves anymore, and you can also change.
That's a wonderful idea, and I wish that was the case, because that would sort of make it sound like the MKUltra stuff makes people fully conscious and aware of what they're doing, but they see something different, and it's a lot darker than that. They split the personalities up by using psychological tactics, which are well recognized. It's partially hypnosis, but mainly it's a series of trauma and personality breaks, and once one of those breaks is developed, you can work with that personality that new personality that you just split off because of extreme dissonance in the brain, and you can develop it with any characteristics that you want. It can be a highly trained killer, it can be extremely coordinated, and it can be snapped right back out just as quickly. But the scary part is people who have been trained in these methods, or I guess I should say indoctrinated or forced to learn these methods, are fully conscious and aware of what they're doing and have all of their faculties, and they know exactly who they're killing when they're killing. But the conscious person that we would all know of them is completely unaware of the other personalities and completely unaware of what they might do.
This has been the big scare, the Manchurian candidate, as Queenie says. There are people that don't even know who they are half of the time.
What's even scarier is that I don't think most people know who they are half of the time. They derive their egos, which are so important to them, from the input of other people. And their entire personalities are almost narcissistically derived from peer pressure and from societal influence. So there's very little real personality beyond the veil. And it's a huge personal journey, which usually involves the use of psychedelics, isolation, and a variety of other methods in order to really quiet the world so that you can hear the sound of your own mind.
DMT, right?
That's one of the big ones. DMT, psychedelic mushrooms.
ECP is a big one.
All that stuff, all those things can expand your mind. They're all extremely dangerous if used incorrectly. But
Absolutely. The government loves them.
Yeah, they try to think that you can achieve a similar brain state or a similar type of enlightenment without those substances. Yeah, it's possible. You might spend 30 years doing it, but you can take one thing and basically, short step or shortcut that process. It's not like you're going to get the same thing out of it. You're not going to understand everything that you see or experience, but there's no way you're going to come back out of a strong trip of any kind and not feel at some point during that trip that connectedness, that oneness with all of nature and everything. That's sort of what it does. It breaks the illusion of duality, and it shuts off the part of the brain responsible for generating the illusion of the ego or the self, thinking that we are somehow separate from our environment or that we exist independently from the rest of our species, which of course we don't.
Beagle's asking a question about orgone energy. Do you know much about orgone, the William Reich?
I built a few accumulators, and I've had a chance to play with them. I've never observed personally anything that was particularly interesting. We built a couple of cloud busters. Biggest of them was like 7 feet long, very expensive for the copper pipes. And leaving it pointed at one spot in the clouds, we thought we seen an effect, but it was not conclusive and it was not really obvious. Like there wasn't a clearly bored tunnel straight through the clouds wherever this thing was pointing. And I would say at any rate, any effects that it might have had were minimal, if negligible. So I don't know if there's anything to orgone or if it's simply a misunderstood phenomena that probably has a much more reasonable explanation.
So you don't think, do you think that there's more tests that could be done to actually make that work? Is there ways that you could harness that to make that device work?
There's a lot of claims. There's a lot of claims like orgone accumulators will generate electricity and they'll shock you or they'll cause your body to become charged or objects to become charged. Well, charge in scientific terms has a very tangible definition, and it refers to the electrical potential of any given body. And we know the mechanism by which that electrical potential is achieved. It's through the removal or addition of electrons. And so if an orgone accumulator has the ability to, in translation, directly add or remove electrons from a test subject or from an object, then that's something that we can look for. And in my experiments, when I built orgone accumulators and tested for voltage, even with extremely high impedance meters, which should have been more than capable of measuring without drawing more than a couple fractions of a microamp. So obviously I know that my meters are not shorting the output terminals of this device. I got nothing, ever, on any of them. And I tried multiple materials. I've tried the steel wool and cotton for the organics. I've tried poly wool and all kinds of other stuff, and I've never gotten any of them to do really anything interesting. So maybe I'm approaching it wrong. Maybe I'm too practical, but they don't want to be.
Have you checked for resistance to ground on the metal plates?
The ones I haven't built ones with solid metal plates. I built ones with like meshes or various other things. Supposedly it's volumetric. The idea is that the orgone accumulator is some kind of volumetric phenomena. It's not quite like a capacitor where you have a surface area effect, but you have a three-dimensional volume area.
cage, right? It's like a floating Faraday cage. So the question is, how strong is your dielectric to keep it floating and not grounding out to ground? Because if there was any potential being created there, it might just turn into a little bit of heat.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and this is exactly why I had to research it, because these devices that people were building out of film, these little film canisters for 35 millimeter film, they were claiming that they were getting shocked with these things and they were generating some kind of measurable power. And so if they're throwing these things together at home with no knowledge of electricity or engineering or anything else, and they're just copying something they've seen on the internet and they're claiming that it works, then with those same exact inferior materials or with superior materials, both of which I tried, you would expect some kind of result to be observed by somebody who knows how to take those measurements and is professionally trained in it. And so I did consider the ground impedance. I did consider the resistance of the measurement equipment that I was using, and I did consider other factors like air humidity possibly leaking off current. But these things supposedly generate like less than a few thousand volts, if not maybe a few hundred volts. So in my experimenting, like I said, I've never even touched the meter to one of these terminals and seen a little spike. It's just always been nothing but radio noise. And I've been able to find some systems that did generate some RF noise, but it turns out that they were just receiving other RF signals from nearby. So that had really nothing to do with orgone, unfortunately.
What about the Joe engine? The Joe cell?
That's something called, yeah.
I've built 4 of those in various configurations, all stainless steel. I built 3 flat plate units, and I built 1 tube inside of tube unit. That was a very conventional cell. What I can tell you about the Joe cell is that, yes, it generates HHO. Yes, it does work great as an electrolysis machine. No, it does not generate any extra output.
All right.
The cell supposedly is just an electrolysis device that you hook straight up to your car battery. There's no resonance circuits. There is no active electronics. There is no switching of that kind. It's just you hook it up to your battery, and supposedly it's supposed to generate more power than it consumes in terms of burnable gases versus electrical input. And that, I can tell you with 100% certainty, is not true.
Yeah, that might have been a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it definitely does not put out even close to as much gas power that it consumes.
Yeah, that's good. So the Stan Meier water power car thing might be
that Stan Meier is totally different. That stuff did have active sweeping circuitry and particle accelerators in it, so that's a very tangible technology in my opinion.
I met a guy trying to reproduce that, and he was doing something with particular frequencies attuned lasers and trying to do laser electrolysis. I don't know. I don't even know if he.
Can you hand me that William Reich's book real quick? I just wanted Stuffed Beagle to know, if you're interested in orgone, you want to look into it. We have orgone category channels on the Discord. Go to the radio chartery chat and check it out, and we can get some more information to you, as we will do more with Jeremiah, because I think some people there, like Amora and Brittany, might have some ideas on how to make this work better.
Oh yeah, if anyone's got ideas on how to make any of this work, I'd love to run
every failure, we're excluding impossible designs. So
yeah, there is one HHO technology that I looked at in the last few years that I was extremely excited to witness. I think it's a Japanese company. It's one of the Asian areas out there. It's Japan or China or something like that, or Korea. I don't remember where it's from, but anyways, this guy and his company, they produce an ultrasonic transducer system that uses a small amount of electricity for electrolysis, but under the influence of the ultrasonic waves traveling through the water, they're able to very efficiently split out HHO at a significant gain. So that's a fascinating. I'll have to see if I can find an ultrasonic HHO generator. Maybe
you're using tuned cavities too, like the water tank, right?
Yeah, tuned cavities can really help set up and recover resonance that will be otherwise lost in terms of resistance through the water, because it gets recycled. Water is not instantaneously conductive. It takes a transition time for electrons to make their way all the way across that path because there's so much mass. It's not like a wire at all. So it acts more like a leaky dielectric than it does like a conductor. And treating it like a dielectric, if you switch your fields fast enough, your electrons never actually make it all the way across the circuit. And so because it's like a dielectric, there's another interesting machine that uses a DC across its bus conductor, the plate that produces the HHO gas. It uses DC on both sides of the plate, but the interesting thing is it switches off DC coming in from one side of the plate and then just sends it over to the other, so it shoots back and forth, traveling laterally across the surface of the plate like a surface wave. And as a result, it supposedly is able to generate significantly greater outputs than if it were just connected with a wire in the center. So that's another really interesting concept that takes into account some of the properties of capacitance that you can get with water.
Are they trying to chase an over unity device, or is this just going to be for like chemical industry? You know,
they're talking about using it for power generation.
holy shit! There was a team in France. I have this video somewhere. I need to find it. It's they were experimenting with sonoluminescence from ultrasound in like 1994 or 5. They claimed to have transmuted iron into other elements and gotten energy out, or at least heated the water. It was weird. The whole thing like was funded by the French government and then got shut down.
That's really interesting. That reminds me very much like the Ormus stuff and the amount of atomic elements that were doing strange things like showing up on spectrography tests as a variety of different elements that weren't in the original samples.
Right.
We have to experiment with that. We have a chemist on another channel who's produced this stuff. He has a process.
You do it too, right? Jeremiah does.
Yeah, I've done it. I don't do it anymore because I didn't get results that were significant enough to invest the time into. But I did see weird problems. Like I definitely had powder floating over a spoon and rolling back and forth. It's
like paramagnetism or something.
That's actually a really good way to describe it, except for there was no magnetic field present. So all I did is I just took
like a superconductor.
I just heated it up with a torch. I had some small amount of the sample on there. I think it was like 0.5 grams or something of mixed Ormus powder that was derived from Dead Sea salts using an instructional video that's available on YouTube in multiple formats. But it's basically a extraction where you acidify, you drop stuff out into a suspension that's a milky-like substance in water, and then you basify, and you then farther remove the remaining suspended materials by supersaturating the water with other salts. And what you end up with is when you dry out this murky white fluff inside of your collection vial, it ends up becoming a powder that looks very much like dirty baking soda. Not dirty, but I would just say more like ivory kind of yellowish baking soda. And when you heat it up above 400 degrees, it starts to exhibit weird properties. First thing it does is it starts to change its volume. The big pile of powder that I had on the spoon that took up most of the surface of the spoon significantly reduced its volume. I assume that was moisture evaporating from the sample, but I'm not exactly sure. I did notice at that point I stopped the test and I remeasured the weight, and I did lose some small percentage of weight. I continued to heat it up, and past 600 degrees it started to change color and floated over the surface of the spoon. You couldn't see a gap between the clump of powder, but the powder just goes on as fine granules, and it ended up, it kind of stuck together. If you were to poke it and dust it as it was floating over the spoon with a toothpick, you could dust off some powder on the surface. But it all kind of stuck together at once and moved like a solid object. Then beyond that point, it stops rolling over the spoon. It gets a darker color. It loses a little bit more weight. That never came back. And after that point, I've never been able to get it to levitate on the spoon after you heat it up beyond 600 degrees. After that color change is observed.
Wait.
I know that I had a really, really impure sample. I didn't isolate out any particular single monoatomic element, which I believe is necessary to see any of the phenomenal effects that were claimed.
Gold.
So yeah, gold would be the one that we definitely would want to work with. It has, I think, the most viable properties, and the fact that it's fairly neutral offers itself up as one of the best ways to scientifically investigate, because we know that it's not going to be reacting with other things in the same way that we might expect other metals to react.
Oh, man. 79, it's a prime number. It's a really interesting arrangement.
What's interesting about gold is one of the Vimana videos I was watching actually claimed that mercury, which is element 80, I believe, would spin around in these cyclotrons inside the craft, and it lost a neutron, turning it into gold. And the gold was actually clogging up the tubes of the warp drive of the Vimana craft, and it was one of the junk products, the garbage products of the Vimanas. So
that's interesting.
Of mercury.
Yeah, I'd love to have a byproduct of gold. That'd be a great problem to have. Unless you're in space, of course, then that would really suck.
They hit the moon with some type of satellite or something, and it's supposedly they measured the spectroscopic emission, and I thought it was mercury, like on the
tons
poles
of
of the
mercury
moon,
in the
on
poles.
of
Oh,
the moon.
right, mercury
I
in
know,
the
I heard
poles.
this somewhere.
Yeah,
It is an
yeah.
official thing.
Mercury in the poles. That's right. That was a thing. There
Well,
was
it's
frozen,
not
but it
like
used to be giant rivers of mercury. That's
Something
what
like more
there's a
than
whole
you would
article
imagine
that they put out on that. Yeah.
Geologic
crazy
Yeah,
amounts of mercury. It was
formation.
right after we were like, we've been doing this thing on Star Forts, and then 13th Monkey
This
was
is
like, I
years
don't know,
ago
I'm
for
just
me.
visualizing after looking at this idea of lots of mercury, liquid mercury, in
We found pools of mercury in underground temples, or whatever you want to call them. They claim they're ceremonial sites or something, and the mercury was somehow a spiritual tool. Like, come on, why would they have thousands and thousands of gallons of mercury in one of these underground caverns that somehow is still sitting there? Was it really a spiritual thing? Do you really think that people went down there and just stared at their reflection? I mean, come on.
I definitely would do that.
Vimonocraft. It was probably a connection with the Vimonocraft, and this is all they had left over. And
That's exactly what I think.
they basically
Wow.
the science. They're worshiping the science of the mercury, and that's how the craft worked. The mercury.
That's interesting.
I'll see
One
if I can
second.
find
Sorry.
What's up?
What?
Qin Huang, Emperor of China, had the terracotta army, and they had rivers of mercury. They're supposed to represent actual rivers, but why would you extract mercury highly?
Anybody else remember this? What Ben's talking about? The terracotta soldiers, the terracotta army, that they were actually around rivers of mercury.
I didn't hear anything about the rivers of mercury, and the fact that
the rivers were simulated using mercury.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right.
Because mercury.
Go ahead.
Comes from
mercury doesn't form naturally.
No, it's extracted from cinnabar using heat. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the Teotihuacan caves that supposedly have filled with rivers of mercury.
Same thing.
That's
Asia,
phenomenal.
Central and South America.
Very strange.
But of course, I'm looking through pictures of this site, and I'm trying to find any pictures of these alleged rivers of mercury. And unfortunately, looking into this farther, I'm not really finding them.
Right.
If it was found, if obviously this is a real site that anybody can go visit, but if there really is some area of this site that has rivers of mercury, I'm not seeing any kind of photographic or video evidence of it. So I hope that it is true and that it's just been removed or something, because that would be really fascinating.
There's no way to tell. You'd have to go there. There'd be some kind of chemical test.
Are you guys able to see my page still? Is that working? My picture there?
Oh yeah, another Chinese.
I don't think it's actually working. I'm trying to find examples of the mercurial river.
Died from ingesting mercury. Remember that one? It was crazy.
I mean, that's a lot of mercury. And if you start thinking about how...
This guy drank a potion of mercury to live forever and killed him.
Whoops. Earlier we were talking about the Dracos having technology that can make you young, the 20 and back program that Gaia was talking about. The name of that old man who supposedly passed away, what was his name again?
Gaia?
Yeah, Gaia Cosmic Disclosures.
The guy who was making the models.
Old man.
No, just search by episode.
Robert Stanley?
No, that's not his name.
I don't know. We saw some guy also talking about this, and then he passed away.
Kerry Cassidy did the announcement. He was saying he's going to live forever and get the technology.
Well,
let's see.
Let me see. Try another thing here. Tartaria Cotta soldiers. Bing, bing, bing. Okay. Where is Nathan? Ferrous Mercury. Terracotta soldiers, not rivers of mercury. Not even ground radar scans. The first emperor was buried in the palace. 100, according to this account, 100 flowing rivers were simulated using mercury, and above them the scenes were decorated with heavenly bodies.
That's what I read, but of course they don't show you anything beyond that.
Yes. From the first account, rivers of mercury, hidden from history.
This guy, William something, isn't it? William Tompkins, is that the guy?
William Tompkins.
Yeah, he said he was going to get a pill and he would get age regress back to 29 or 30. and have another lifespan.
Let me.
But he was saying that like in several interviews before the cosmic disclosure thing came out. And then
So
apparently he died.
William Tompkins, kind of an interesting guy.
I don't know.
Wait, no, that's not the right one. This guy, yeah. So he went to Hollywood High School in California. This is not the right. There he is. Right there. William Tompkins.
Yeah. Oh, this other guy was pretty interesting, but I just forgot. Robert Wood. I've heard some of his stuff. I just can't remember.
I'm pretty interested in William Tompkins recently. I don't know how much. I'm sure that what he said was accurate all the time, but William Tompkins, and he said some stuff that really like triggers. I mean, he knows a lot about the stuff that I've been talking about with Maria Orsich, and he was a draftsman who was very important in Hollywood because he did models that the military were using, and he went to Hollywood High School and was brought out of Hollywood High School for the military purpose. And he was making these ships, and then all of a sudden he was starting adding these ideas, these kind of pseudo-sci-fi futuristic weapon systems to his models, and that's when he was brought in to design for the future. And they're like, hey, you should know about getting cleared for the weird, as it's called.
The woo-woo.
What is the woo-woo? It's like being C-14'd, I think it is.
I have not.
Live streaming is on. And you see it?
I can. Okay, yeah, looks like we're back on.
Okay, cool. All right, sorry guys. You know we're beating the system right now. This is a 3-hour stream and we're still going. We're gonna finish strong, but I wanted to make sure we covered the last little bit. So, William Tompkins, Hollywood High School, designed models. Eventually started adding to his cool little boat models, super weapons and sensory technology that wasn't released to the public yet, but probably saw in comic books. He started doing channeling. And he got involved with the Nordics, and I don't mean the human ones. And eventually, with the help of the Pleiadians, he said he would live forever because all you need to do is take these cool pills, and you get the 20 back. And it'll make you look, if you're a girl, like you're 19, 25, whatever it was, 23. It's probably 23. And then if you're a guy, you look 27 to 30, basically forever.
Flame.
You'll live for 3,000 years. And he said this, and then right after he released all this information, he died, you know?
Well,
and so
look up Carrie Cassidy and then him.
Yeah, Carrie.
She said like he died.
Well, okay. How do you spell that? Carrie Cassidy?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's her channel called?
This is her. And you look at Carrie Cassidy and tell me she's not an MKUltra expert. But
I don't know. She said she had kind of
Those bills.
Never tell.
MKUltra to pay the bills. Ouch. Ouch. All right. Well, cosmic disclosure is got to be one of the weirdest, sensational. It's like the 50s sci-fi ancient aliens thing. But some of this stuff, man, I got to say, like the stuff that he's talking about is reasonable. The idea that the Second World War was the Second World, and so that the Germans had access to technology from this other world through the Vril and the Pleiadians, and that's what the U.S. government was trying to get their hands on afterwards. What do you think about the 20 and back program as a concept? Do you think there's any salt to this idea that that the pill? I mean, I think we all know that it's plausible to take DNA and have an earlier age. But do you think this exists already?
It makes sense that it's possible to do it. There's just no evidence at this moment, other than Corey Goods and whoever the new guy is say so. And unless we can verify something that he said that's real, such as the fact that the visitations are no longer going to happen, the abductions are no longer going to happen. So long as we can see something like that, that's tangible evidence that's real, then there's no way to know for sure whether these people are telling the truth without full disclosure.
What about Ray Kurzweil and his effort to live forever, and some of these elite that are working towards these pills? Do you think that what do you think about that effort towards releasing life extension technology? Some of these people that are involved with this and this new it's a huge part of it's changing everything you consume, taking all these chemicals.
He takes
$1,000 a day
with like 40 different supplements.
Yeah, because it's impossible to eat 100 pills a day. I tried to eat this guy's diet for a while. It's crazy. Like, you basically need to strap it all into a Tide Pod and just go.
It could be like just showing us.
And then
we're not going to get
who's the other guy? Something gray.
the guy
They're all
with
not even
Oh,
Cosmic
okay.
Disclosure has any stories of pills that make you live forever. It's all basic. It's all basically advanced technology that gives you a new body. They transfer your soul from one body to another,
Right.
or they have more, more advanced bodies that can live for a couple hundred years. But I've never heard of anything, even in the most far out reaches of Cosmic Disclosure or Gaia. Is there anything out there of people talking about a magic pill that makes you live forever? It just doesn't exist.
Not that you live
Just
forever
saying.
from one pill, but that it could retract your age, and then you could continually take it, and then they could that way that you'd be on a subscription plan that you.
What's weird, they're all kind of talking about that, but
Well, the key is subscription plan. How much does it cost per month? How much money are they making? It's all about the money.
Your soul. It costs your soul. That's forever. But there are, I mean, you're allegiant to this military power, it would be. But so there have been a lot of work. If you look into Twist Bioscience, they're doing a lot with genome compiling, and their idea is take people's DNA, sequence it, and then make an adenoviral. You inject that virus into you, which then when you get better, rather than just having a vaccine or something, you actually have your own DNA sequence from when you were young.
Rewrite your genome.
It's a really great idea.
It's the only way to do it, because you know.
It's a great.
But your DNA doesn't change over your life, does it?
Your DNA changes every moment. Your DNA opens and closes, and your telomeres shatter if you don't take enough mRNA.
The problem is the telomeres. When they get too darn short, DNA can't replicate properly, and pieces start missing, and that's when you get your cell mutations. Yeah. Cancer is effectively nothing more than the slow reduction and elimination of the telomeres on the ends of the DNA chain, which are considered to be junk DNA. For those who don't know what that is, a telomere is a long chain of DNA that exists at the ends of both sides of every DNA chain. And when these micro machines inside your cells go to rip apart that DNA chain, they tend to have some issues at the start and stop. So DNA is longer than it needs to be so that they can make mistakes and lose pieces and still be fine. But every time you get a DNA split or replication, a little more information is lost. And eventually so much is lost that the cells can't divide properly and they mutate instead. But
a lot of people get confused when you use the word junk. Can you describe
DNA? It's very necessary DNA in order for our cells to divide the number of times they need to divide over the course of an average human lifespan. The real trouble with modern society and Western culture is that our diets are so horrible and we blast ourselves with so much crap through EM radiation, through exposure to exhaust chemicals, other fumes, and things that we just shouldn't be around, that our bodies are repairing themselves and dividing new cells to replace old ones at an extremely high rate. Like, we should not be in a continuous state of unhealthiness or a continuous state of disease. And that seems to be where most people in Western culture are. A little something is wrong with everybody, it seems, and we're always struggling to just kind of get back to baseline and be our normal selves. And that's a problem. So having a good diet is the best place to sustain life if we wanted to talk about anything tangible. I'd love to have a pill that does it. That'd be great.
Research the letter J. Says, no, do you just mean like the numerical value, or is this like an Indiana Jones thing? Latin Jesus begins with an I. I don't know. We're going with that yet. I think that this is pretty legit, though. To be perfectly honest, is like we need to start looking into DNA and junk DNA is something we're going to find is not. It's not that it's changing all the time, but it's changing all the time, on and off. It's churning on and off sequences. And so once
the DNA chain doesn't actually change when those sequences get activated, deactivated. The chain stays exactly the same. The information is the same. It's just that environmental conditions cause the body to automatically activate certain parts.
So that's the thing that I think confuses people a lot. It's not that it's junk, it's just that it's potentially dormant, and it's there though. And
they had an episode out on this word.
Well, the reason why they call the telomeres junk DNA, because originally the term junk DNA was coined when there was just a whole bunch of DNA strands that we had no idea what the hell they did in the center of the chains. But now I think it's mainly used to describe the ends of the DNA strand that we know can be lost without really any effect, up to the point where you start getting into the parts of the DNA that do have an effect.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily deactivated twilight mist. It's just that
They
it's
also call it non-coding sequences too.
yeah. There's
Which is interspersed between the telomeres, so you can only have 64 codons, and if it's not gonna work with that, then they call that junk too.
I think we've been doing a pretty good show at this 3.5 hour junction. Is there anything else that you guys want to cover?
Did you watch the TV show Chernobyl?
Finally did. I have seen it, yes.
It's very interesting what radiation does to your
I'd
body.
give it a 7. Not
DNA.
bad, not terrible.
They were trying to make it like as accurate as possible, but
Yeah, I mean, it was. I found it morally offensive, and I actually made like an hour-long video describing all of what, like, growing up, my problems with the official narrative of, Soviet Union ineptitude was just drunken nuclear physicists going, whoops! It's just really hard. It's a real hard sell to a Slav. But you start looking into Chernobyl happening on the eclipse of Pluto, and the fact that they don't even mention that in the show should give you some kind of concern. There's a lot of weird things going on around.
What eclipse of Pluto are you talking about?
There was an eclipse of Pluto that happened on the day of the meltdown. And
What was the eclipse?
let me find you the thing. Pripyat Pluto eclipse with the moon, I think it is. Let me just check.
April 26, 1986.
It was eclipsing a star?
Let me make sure. Mercury. It might have been Mercury. I don't know. It's Pluto and Mercury or Pluto and a star. Let me make sure though. Let me see. Chernobyl.
See the date also.
Yeah. I wish I still had. I somewhere have a piece of paper that like reads the like conjuncts that were happening astrologically because they're really. There was a total lunar eclipse conjunct to Pluto on April 25th. It was a total lunar eclipse conjunct to Pluto, and there was there's another thing. Pluto and Mercury aligned directly the second day, and then there was some. Now I need to find the chart because the zodiac chart also had some weird stuff that happened. But the reason why that, I mean, like, I, as someone who doesn't really go for astrology per se or anything like that, like the reason that that's kind of interesting to me is because Ronald Reagan couldn't make a speech without his wise personal astrologer to choose when he got on a plane, when he got off a plane, like whether he made a speech, whether he didn't make a speech, who he talked to, what day you meet with someone based on their zodiac. If you're Ronald Reagan, the amount of playing 8 years of nothing but astrological decision making. It wasn't made based on his prowess as a political figure or a military general. It was made on the fact that he was an actor and he was being advised by a horoscope. So there's a lot of things going on in the background about and then you have to think about people that are raised their family, they're raised all their lives in one country, but they have very little allegiance to the place that they're raised. And that there's a lot of double agents. And there's agents that, that they're raised in the Soviet Union all their life, but they love the United States because they're a part of the Romanovs. And then people in the United States that are the vice versa. And then them that they've known each other. So then they have their own kids that know about this, and then they're double agents. So they know that they're American sympathizers, but really they actually are deep down Soviet still. So it's like the complications during this period when the Soviet Union was at this and cocaine. Gun and cocaine trafficking in the Soviet Union and around the world by the CIA completely devastated the Soviet Union. Hunger was rampant. Drug addiction amongst these central planners, it completely decimated.
There's a lot of rumors that the CIA was responsible for bringing
cocaine in the CIA. God, what a crazy theory! What?
But,
no.
When they invaded Afghanistan.
Opium in Afghanistan and I don't know. That's just whoa, buddy. That's just
we're talking before the Berlin Wall falls.
I just saw an article that some CIA official, DEA, Department of Drug Enforcement, were caught having a party with strippers, and they were snorting cocaine in the offices of the DEA.
That wouldn't surprise me.
That's actually what ended up happening to Jimmy Carter's DEA head was caught doing that. And that plus the fact that they caught him because they had such great surveillance on each other completely led to the end of Carter's presidential campaign for the second term, but also the one and only for George Poppy Bush. And, Poppy was the CIA leader, and he didn't want to be president, but he had to be, basically.
Reagan get shot in the leg or something?
Reagan got shot. I don't know if it was in the
first
leg, but he got shot. It might have been in his stomach. Yeah, he got shot. Oh
It was
God,
real early.
most gnarly thing when Reagan got shot too, because the guy who shot him was just released into the public a couple of years ago because he got like a mental case, and then they let him out because of policies that Reagan had implemented. That basically,
Hinckley Jr.
whom loved Jodie Foster and used to go to Jodie Foster's college in order to, hang out and watch her. And he would call her number and get her number. And eventually he's like, Jodie Foster wants me to kill the president, which is one of the first introductions most of America has to MKULTRA. Like, wait, crazy people are being told by celebrities to assassinate the president? What? That was America's first taste,
Right now, it's on a whole nother level. They're impeaching Trump for bullshit crimes.
So Reagan was inaugurated in January and he got shot in March. 2 months he was in, and then he gets shot.
Test all things.
Bush was the CIA director at the time, and then you had,
Andreas, what do you think about this impeachment inquiry that's going on?
Oh, it's like, it is what it is. I'm gonna be in Bermuda next week. I can't be the one to like be invested politically and have breakdowns over the weather. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I think it's obviously gonna be really silly. And I don't think, because that's what it is. It's the whole world is silly, and this is going to be a distraction from something more interesting.
It channels people's emotional energy.
What bothers me is that this week should have been the week where cannabis was federally legalized, and instead people are really excited about going to court, which is like the exact opposite vibe that I was hoping America was going for this week. Merry Christmas and Happy Solstice. But, at the same time, also, like, what does it even matter? Because, did you or did you not read the Baron Trump's Underground Adventure yet? Have you read The Last President yet? Because in the 1890s, published by the same guy who published Tesla's books, is the Baron Trump stories. And there's a story, it's a book published in the 1890s all about a little boy named Baron Trump who has a magical dog and goes through underground tunnel adventures with aliens. And it ends with the anarchists trying to destroy Trump Tower. And again, 1890s. There is no Trump Tower in the 1890s. So it's kind of nice. It's even on Fifth Avenue, like in the book.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's all there. You need to see this book if you haven't. Baron Trump and the Underground Marvelous Journey.
Son-in-law has, 666 Fifth Avenue or something?
Yeah, which was Tiffany's at one point, and he helped buy it, which is like... So there's a lot of stuff going on there. But what's more, it looks to me, is like, I don't think Trump's that worried about it. He does that whole like, I got punched, I didn't even feel it, I didn't even feel nothing, no big deal. Like, and then he's gonna go on to Israel because there's a lot more going on than just the United States, and I think he knows that. And this is partially part of like a bigger move. But do I think he'll be president again? Yeah, I don't think Biden's gonna be president, and if people don't get that through their heads soon, then he definitely will, because Biden's, come on, what? Like, and
he's unfit to be president.
He's unfit to be president. That doesn't mean that other people are fit to be president. I'm just saying Biden's creepy Joe, and there's no reason to even pretend that makes sense. And it's just crazy that we're at this point and they're still trying to do it, which is why it makes sense that they were trying to make Trump look bad. The problem is you don't give arsenic and it's like firemen throwing gasoline on a fire by trying to give bad press to a guy who loves bad press. This is what could Trump want more than the opportunity to speak in front of everyone and be heard? And ever since it was announced that this happened, his ratings have gone up 6%. So that's my opinion.
If you watch the news the night of the impeachment, he timed it perfectly. As they were taking a roll call for the vote in Congress, he's standing in front of 100,000 people giving a speech, at a rally in where was it? In the center of the country somewhere. was perfect. It was a split screen. You have Trump on one side talking about his shit, and on the other side they're impeaching him.
Yeah, I mean, this is the world that
It's
we're.
like Rome again. We're back in Rome.
He had an aide who was actually watching the event. And he like whispered in his ear, "You were just impeached," and he announced to the crowd, "Hey guys, I just got impeached."
But this is definitely the most I'd like ever wanted to get into anything political. I always try to avoid it and stay in history or the future, because let's study the history better. Let's build a new future. Let's not worry about that, because it's going to take at least 4 years for us to build anti-gravity. So one way or another, it's going to be us, not them, that changes the world.
My goal is just some sort of experiment, some sort of rig that proves the proof of concept, and from there we bring that out to the world and see where it goes. But for us right now, it should be proof of concept and nothing more than that.
Totally agree.
It's beautiful, the stuff that you guys are doing. I'm really excited. I can't wait to get you guys back. We're gonna hopefully visit you soon, and I also really want to bring Ben, if that's cool with you guys. I think that'd be fun to have in the lab.
I'm down with anybody. What about that girl that was supposed to come down?
Brittany's been in the chat. At some point, we'll see if we can get that to happen. She's going to be visiting hopefully again, because she comes.
I'm using her computer actually.
Yeah, we got Linux going on the yoga right now.
The Linux thing.
But yeah, so Brittany, hopefully Ben will come through. I really want to see more about the Tesla coil, Jeremiah. Maybe we can help make you, like, you can sell a kit. We can help you.
Get ready. I'll definitely want to go back on and kind of.
Definitely.
What its availability is going to be and whatnot. But that'll be what I'm spending a lot of energy and time on over the course of the next month or two, at least, until I get it out there, because I really need a source of funding.
Yeah, I'd love to have everybody who's interested in having a Tesla coil come to Tartary Nova and get one. Like, I think it'll be.
Should be way bigger than that.
We'll get as many people as possible to tell everyone.
You need a brand name for it. You need to come with something.
I've got one. Yeah, I've got it branded. It's got a title.
Cool.
What I haven't worked out yet is what kind of case I'm going to put it in. I like the idea of it being handheld. I like the idea of it running off a battery. I don't want just another desktop sit on your Tesla coil.
I have some interesting thoughts then that I'll privately send you. I think that I have some ways that you can make that. And, I don't want to say it here, but we'll talk about that more. But guys, thank you so much for doing this, and let's do it again soon.
So nice.
Heck of a broadcast, man. That's the longest one I think I've been on or part of yet.
Yeah, it's pretty insane, right? We're amazing.
It's minds in the same space that are talking about a subject that we're all simultaneously interested in. And of course, the chat really helps fuel that too with the questions that are coming in.
Dude, yeah, I'm really interested also. I think Stuff Beagle wanted you to look up that guy's video. I'm going to watch it too.
Yeah, I found it. I've got it primed up here. And at the end of this, well, after we have a chance to talk, I'll watch it at some point tonight and see what he's working on.
Cool. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to cut it short. Peace out.
All right.
Thanks for watching.
Recent Tartarians.
Yay, that